Hi guys. Tonight we trudge through a forest of stillness, the snow pressing softly against rough cabin walls, and the sky darkens in a way that feels almost physical. You probably won't survive this if you step outside unprepared, but inside the small wooden shelter offers the first glimmer of hope. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you want, post your location and local time so I can imagine you there with me. Now dim the lights and let the story settle around you like a blanket. You step across the rough wooden floorboards, your boots scraping faintly against frost that creeps under the doorframe. The walls are not perfectly straight, and the ceiling slopes in subtle, uneven ways, but there is a comforting solidity to this place. Outside, the wind sculpts the snow into sharp edges and soft drifts, while inside your senses adjust to the faint smoky aroma of the hearth lingering from the day's fire. You trudge closer, hand brushing against the rough-hewn table, and notice the grooves carved by generations of settlers. These marks, small as they seem, speak of ordinary lives against extraordinary cold. A mainstream historical fact, frontier cabins often consisted of a single room, roughly 12 by 12 feet, with simple logs interlocked at the corners and gaps filled with moss or mud. You can imagine a family of 5, sometimes more, crammed together, sharing warmth and negotiating space for chores, sleep and meals. Historians still argue whether cabins with double walls were worth the extra effort, as many people simply relied on layering blankets and clothing to retain heat. Your gaze drifts to the fireplace, the blackened stones telling their own stories. Wood was never just firewood. It was warmth, comfort, even life. You notice the way the embers cling stubbornly to charred logs, how the smoke rises in lazy spirals toward the ceiling before escaping through the chimney. A quirky tidbit, some settlers used green twigs or pine boughs on the hearth floor to create a soft, fragrant mattress for children. It sounds indulgent now, but it added both insulation and a faint scent that masked the harsher odours of frontier life. You crouch to touch a brick at the hearth's edge, feeling residual heat, pulse faintly through it, a reminder that the cabin itself stored warmth like a slow, patient heart. You listen carefully. The wind wails outside, weaving through the trees, bouncing off icy ridges, and carrying the distant clatter of loose branches. Inside, the sound is muted, cushioned by timber blankets and the hushed breathing of others. You notice the faint creak of logs expanding in response to the fire, a subtle reminder that the structure itself is alive. Your own breathing seems louder than it should, mingling with the crackle from the fireplace. It is in these moments, these small, almost imperceptible sounds, that the frontier becomes tangible. The cold is a physical presence pressing on the skin, sinking into fingers and toes, reminding you of how fragile life can feel in such an environment. You wander toward the window, tracing frosted patterns with your fingertips. The moonlight filters through thin glass or sometimes just oiled paper, casting ghostly reflections on the floor. You think about the nights spent peering through these panes, measuring the weather by the stars or guessing whether the wind would shift to the north. A mainstream historical fact, settlers often covered windows with oiled paper cloth or thin animal skins to reduce drafts, a practice that historians still debate in terms of effectiveness versus fire risk. The faint light reveals dust motes dancing lazily, settling over simple furniture, a wooden bench, a few stools, a crate used as a makeshift table. You imagine meals served here, hands warmed over bowls of thick porridge or coffee, and the soft, ritualized motions of daily life in the long winter months. You settle onto a plank near the hearth, wrapping your arms around your knees. Your mind drifts, picturing the long hours spent in isolation, the lull of snow muffling the world beyond. A quirky tidbit, some settlers kept small pouches of heated stones wrapped in cloth tucked into bedding to ward off frostbite during the coldest nights. You wonder how many hands have touched the same stones over the years, how many people have felt the slow radiance of heat against skin in the dark, quiet hours. There is a rhythm here, a measured, almost meditative pace to life in the frontier cabin. You begin to notice how even the act of breathing careful and deliberate contributes to warmth, a subtle engagement with the physical world. The fire crackles louder for a moment, drawing your attention back to its heart. You observe how logs shift the way the heat curls in the corners of the room. You think about the people who lived here before you, their nights long and unforgiving, and wonder how they measured time, comfort, and survival. Historians still argue whether settlers preferred single intense fires or smaller distributed hearths for maximum heat. The smell of charred wood mixes with wool and dried herbs hanging from beams. You can almost taste the air rich with smoke dust and faint animal musk, a sensory tapestry woven from necessity and habit. You tuck your legs closer, feeling the weight of blankets and clothing layering warmth against skin. You imagine the night unfolding slowly each minute, measured by subtle shifts in temperature. The movement of smoke and the occasional groan of the cabin responding to frost. A mainstream historical fact, cabins were often oriented to shield against prevailing winds, a decision that could mean the difference between comfort and life-threatening cold. You can picture settlers peering out at night, evaluating the drift of snow, listening for distant wolves, and adjusting their routines accordingly. It is here in this intimate space that human ingenuity, habit, and sheer stubbornness converge to create survival against the elements. You sigh, letting your body sink deeper into the floor's warmth, and the cabin seems to breathe with you. The faint light from the hearth softens shadows, revealing corners you hadn't noticed before a stack of firewood, a bundle of herbs, a hat hung by the door. You recognize the comfort in ritual, the security in repetition, the reassurance that comes from tactile familiarity. A quirky tidbit, some families line their bedding with dried grasses not just for insulation, but also for the faint rustle that comforted restless children. You imagine the gentle swish as people shifted positions, the subtle symphony of a room alive with quiet life. You can feel the edge of sleep beginning to blur perception, the cabin's warmth wrapping around you like a gentle promise. Outside, the wind wails and the snow drifts, but inside there is a fragile, radiant stillness. You let your eyes close for a moment, taking in the lingering sense, the residual warmth, the small comfort of presence and survival. Historians still debate whether settlers were truly prepared for the deadliest nights, or whether luck and resilience carried them further than planning alone. You feel a deep empathy for those who relied on simple materials, keen observation, and human ingenuity to endure long, relentless nights. And as the room grows quieter, your thoughts slow, drifting in rhythm with the subtle pulse of the cabin itself, ready to carry you forward into the story yet to unfold. You rise slowly from the warmth of the hearth, letting your fingers trail along the uneven logs that form the cabin's walls. Each timber carries a faint aroma of pine or oak, slightly resinous, mingled with the lingering smoke of countless fires. You probably won't notice it at first, but the structure itself is a participant in survival holding warmth, like a patient, slow-breathing organism. A mainstream historical fact frontier cabins were usually built from hand-hewn logs, notched at corners, to interlock securely with chinking made of clay moss, or a mixture of mud and straw to fill gaps. You pause to examine a corner where the mud has cracked in subtle patterns, thinking about the hands that applied it and the nights it has weathered. Historians still argue whether double-layered walls were common or whether most settlers relied on clever placement of furniture and textiles for insulation. It is in these details so easily overlooked that you sense the quiet intelligence of early homesteaders. You move toward the rough window frame fingertips brushing over the splintered wood and notice the little irregularities, a notch here, a groove there, all traces of human effort and necessity. Outside, snow is piled against the cabin walls, sculpted into miniature dunes by wind. You listen to the faint hiss as the cold meets the timber, realizing that the very construction of this cabin is a buffer, a mediator between you and the indifferent elements. A quirky tidbit, some settlers inserted small scraps of metal old tins or even flattened cans between logs, believing the reflective surfaces would help distribute heat more evenly inside the cabin. You can almost see the glinting fragments peeking out from the cracks, tiny reminders of human creativity in the face of relentless cold. Walking around the interior, you take stock of the floorboards, uneven and weathered, each plank carrying the weight of countless footsteps. You notice areas where moss or straw has been tucked in under the gaps, softening the rough surface and providing a layer of insulation from the chill creeping upward. Settlers understood in a practical way that warmth was cumulative, a product not only of fire but also of careful attention to materials. A mainstream historical fact, many cabins had simple lofts or raised sleeping platforms, often covered in straw or dried grasses to reduce contact with the cold floor. You imagine the quiet rustle as someone shifts position during the night, a subtle whisper against the still air. Your gaze drifts to the ceiling beams, thick and low, carrying shadows from the flickering fire. You wonder about the timber choices, oak for durability, pine for availability, cedar for aroma. Historians still debate whether certain woods were deliberately chosen for heat retention or primarily for ease of construction. You can almost hear the faint pop of resin pockets in the logs, tiny explosions that add character to the silence. A quirky tidbit, some frontier families deliberately smoked sections of timber before construction, believing it deterred insects and added a faint, comforting scent to the cabin. You breathe in, letting the combination of wood smoke and faint earthiness settle in your senses. You notice the walls themselves acting like thermal moderators. The logs absorb heat from the fire, slowly releasing it over hours, and in combination with the chinking, they create pockets of relatively stable air. You consider how settlers arranged interior elements to maximize this effect, placing beds near corners where warmth pooled, stacking firewood adjacent to walls and hanging blankets, or furs over exposed surfaces. A mainstream historical fact, hanging quilts or animal hides on walls was a common practice to block drafts and retain heat. You run your hand along a faded quilt hanging near the hearth, imagining the families who crafted it, stitch by careful stitch, each thread a small rebellion against winter's bite. You step toward the doorway and pause, noting the clever improvisations to reduce heat loss. Old boot straw or rags were often tucked under doors to block drafts, creating a secondary seal. Outside, wind howls against the walls, but inside, the combination of timber chinking and strategic placement of materials keeps the chill at bay. Historians still argue whether settlers fully appreciated the physics of airflow or relied largely on trial and error. A quirky tidbit in some cabins, settlers used thin sheets of paper coated with animal fat over gaps in doors or windows, a primitive yet surprisingly effective form of insulation. You picture the faint sheen catching the firelight in subtle, comforting glimmers. You pause again in the centre of the room, taking in the spatial arrangement. Beds along the walls, tables pushed to corners, and a hearth dominating one side, all of it designed not only for function but for survival. Each choice seems deliberate, a quiet strategy against the cold. Mainstream historical fact, the central fireplace was usually the only substantial heat source, making furniture arrangement crucial. You imagine settling into a bed in the loft, or on a platform, the smell of straw and quilts mingling with smoke, and the warmth radiating gently upward. Fringe accounts mention small animals, cats, or even dogs finding perches near the fire, contributing their own body heat to the mix, though historians debate whether this was widespread or sporadic. You run a hand over the chinking between logs, feeling its rough texture and marvel at the balance between rigidity and flexibility. The mud and moss swell and contract with temperature and moisture, adjusting slowly to the changing conditions. You consider how settlers repaired cracks or gaps before nightfall, aware that a single misaligned log could turn a tolerable cabin into a bitterly cold trap. A quirky tidbit: some families applied a thin coating of animal fat over chinking to prevent water seepage and reduce draft, an early frontier innovation. You imagine the smell of smoke and fat mingling, a reminder that survival often relied on a combination of instinct and experimentation. Finally, you settle near the hearth again, the logs groaning softly as they continue to release heat, and take a slow breath. The cabin feels alive in a quiet, patient way, a living participant in your survival. The structure, materials, and careful human touches combine to create an environment where you can endure long frozen nights. Historians still argue whether the ingenuity of settlers or sheer stubbornness played the greater role in surviving the harshest winters, but you can sense both in the timber, the chinking, and the lingering warmth around you. Each detail, each small adaptation, whispers a story of resilience that will carry forward as you drift into the next layer of survival strategy. You turn your attention fully to the hearth, the glowing embers casting a warm, flickering light across the cabin's rough surfaces. The fire is more than just illumination. It is the central organ of survival, pulsing heat into every corner, reminding you that life and comfort are closely intertwined. You probably won't realize how delicate this balance is until you notice the temperature drop in a single careless hour. A mainstream historical fact: settlers often built raised stone hearths to improve heat circulation and reduce fire hazards on the wooden floor. You watch the sparks leap upward and disappear into the chimney, feeling a sense of both awe and reliance. Historians still argue whether open hearths or early metal stoves provided more consistent warmth during the harshest winter nights, and you can understand why both sides have merit. One offers simplicity, the other efficiency. You kneel to adjust a log, noting how its irregular surface influences the pattern of the flames. The crackle resonates softly, echoing off the walls and mingling with the faint whistle of wind outside. Settlers learn to stack wood with intention not only for burning efficiency, but for predictable heat output throughout the night. A quirky tidbit: some frontier families arranged logs in crisscross patterns to encourage slow, steady burning, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm in the firelight. You reach to feel the residual warmth radiating from a partially burned log and sense how it stores energy to release, gradually softening the night's chill even after flames have died down. Your eyes track the chimney flue, noting how it narrows and widens, directing smoke with precision while minimizing heat loss. You probably won't appreciate the subtle design unless you've watched smoke spiral for hours, studying its behavior in different winds. Mainstream historical fact: early cabins often had simple chimneys of stone or brick, sometimes lined with clay to guide smoke out while retaining warmth inside. Fringe accounts suggest that some families added small reflective surfaces or tin panels near the flue to radiate extra heat back into the room, though historians still debate whether these practices were widely adopted or experimental. You feel the ingenuity of trial and error, a tactile history in motion. You notice the careful placement of kindling and tinder around the hearth, ready for rekindling during long nights. A handful of dried grass, small twigs, or pine shavings could mean the difference between quick warmth and an agonizing wait. Quirky tidbit: in some diaries, settlers mention sleeping with a small bundle of embers in an iron pot wrapped in cloth to maintain a low smoulder for early morning fire starting. You imagine the faint warmth radiating, even as everyone sleeps, a subtle guardian against frostbite. Historians still argue whether this method posed significant risk, or if it was a clever compromise between safety and practicality. The air near the fire carries a medley of scents charred wood smoke, and faint herbal notes from cooking or medicinal plants hung nearby. You probably won't notice them all separately at first, but over hours they coalesce into a comforting familiar aroma. A mainstream historical fact, settlers often dried herbs and grasses near the hearth to both preserve them and infuse a gentle scent into the cabin, indirectly masking less pleasant odours. You breathe deeply, feeling the warmth seeping into your fingers and toes, a slow, methodical spread that makes the cabin feel more like a living entity than a static structure. You watch the behaviour of the flames, observing how they shift with the log arrangement airflow and the moisture content of the wood. Some logs spark more readily, others smoulder quietly, producing a gentle, sustained heat. Quirky tidbits: certain frontier families use slightly green wood for long-lasting embers that burned slowly even though it produced more smoke. The trade-off was a steady warmth through the coldest hours. Historians still debate whether settlers fully understood these subtleties, or if they stumbled upon them by necessity and repeated experience. You let your gaze linger on the hearth, feeling a sense of calm derived not just from heat, but from understanding and rhythm. You notice how furniture and bedding are oriented relative to the fire. Beds, cots, or straw-filled pallets cluster near the hearth, or along walls that radiate warmth, maximising heat retention. You probably won't realise the subtle planning involved until you feel the difference between lying near a cold wall and curling up close to the hearth's glow. A mainstream historical fact, families often moved beds seasonally adjusting proximity to the fire, based on outdoor temperatures and available fuel. Fringe reports suggest some even used reflective tin panels behind the hearth to direct warmth further into the room, though adoption remains debated. You imagine the soft rustle of quilts, furs and straw as bodies adjust for comfort, each movement harmonising with a steady pulse of heat from the fire. You reach to stoke the embers, feeling the warmth radiate into your palm. The fire is more than mere combustion. It is a carefully maintained system of survival, a responsive companion. Quirky tidbit: some settlers placed stones in the fire to absorb and radiate heat slowly through the night, a low-tech but effective method for maintaining consistent warmth. You can almost hear the soft hiss as residual moisture evaporates, a subtle reminder that even small adjustments carry meaning. Historians still argue whether stone heat retention was widely practiced or limited to particularly harsh regions, but its principle feels timeless, an echo of human ingenuity. You take a step back, noticing how the firelight dances across walls, blankets and bundles of clothing. The room feels alive, every corner imbued with the rhythm of heat movement and survival. You probably won't appreciate the subtle choreography unless you've spent hours observing it, letting your mind track temperature shifts, smoke patterns and ember behaviour. Mainstream historical fact: settlers sometimes rearranged logs and embers multiple times during the night to maintain a steady temperature gradient. Fringe accounts even describe small temporary screens of tin or brick to shield sleeping children from sudden drafts. You imagine the careful attentiveness required, a silent ritual that transforms mere wood and stone into a life-sustaining system. The warmth penetrates slowly into your body, your muscles relaxing as you feel the combined effect of fire clothing and the insulated cabin. Quirky tidbit diaries mention children occasionally placing their hands near embers while listening to tales, absorbing both heat and story simultaneously. You recognise the interplay of practical survival and comfort, the subtle artistry of everyday life in the cabin. Historians still argue whether such practices were rooted in culture necessity or a mixture of both, but their impact is undeniable. You let your attention soften following the slow dance of embers and smoke as night deepens around the protective walls of timber and warmth. You settle onto a worn straw mattress near the hearth, feeling the texture prickling lightly through layers of quilts and blankets. The room seems to exhale with you, carrying warmth into every shadowed corner. You probably won't grasp just how crucial these layers are until the cold penetrates past clothing and furniture, reminding you that survival depends on small details. Records indicate that settlers often combined hand-stitched quilts, thick wool blankets and animal pelts to create layered insulation, each material chosen for its particular ability to trap heat. You tug a soft, slightly matted rabbit fur, closer marvelling at the warmth it radiates, even after being handled countless times over the years. Diaries recount that frontier families frequently slept head to foot, stacking bodies in an alternating pattern to share warmth effectively. You can almost sense the rhythm, the careful coordination as each person adjusts to maximize contact while avoiding discomfort. Observations from the period reveal that children sometimes slept between adults or next to small pets, both as a source of heat and emotional reassurance. The combination of textiles, body heat, and strategic positioning formed a sophisticated, if unspoken, system for enduring the coldest nights. Some accounts suggest that settlers occasionally tucked heated stones or metal objects into bedding as rudimentary radiators. A method that sounds quirky now, but was surprisingly effective for maintaining warmth during long winter hours. You run your hand across the blankets, noting the slight variations in fabric and stitch. The quilts are often patchworks of salvaged material, yet each square tells a story of resourcefulness. It is believed that using multiple smaller layers rather than a single thick blanket allowed heat to circulate more effectively, trapping warmth closer to the body while preventing sweat from cooling the skin. Evidence points to settlers' deep understanding of these tactile details, developed through necessity rather than formal instruction. The sensation of these layers pressing gently against your arms and legs creates a cocoon of comfort, a buffer against the harsh night outside. You observe the placement of furs in particular, noting how they are draped strategically over the sides of beds or tucked beneath sleeping individuals. Frontier experience shows that heavier pelts, such as bear or buffalo, provided substantial insulation when spread on floors or used as bed covers, while softer furs offered warmth directly against skin. Anecdotal reports describe small families rotating blankets and pelts throughout the night, adjusting for temperature changes or for individuals who became chilled more quickly. You feel a sense of quiet awe at how these simple materials manipulated thoughtfully could produce such effective protection from extreme cold. Moving slightly, you notice the subtle layering of clothing atop the bedding. Some accounts suggest that settlers slept fully dressed in multiple layers, including woolen undergarments, flannel shirts, and thick outer coats. Records indicate that this approach minimized heat loss, while allowing quick adaptation if a fire waned overnight. You tug at your own clothing, imagining the sensation of additional weight pressing against your chest and shoulders, a firm reminder of how clothing functioned as both armor and insulation. Diaries recount the odd practice of keeping hats or gloves on during sleep, a quirky but practical method to retain warmth in extremities that were most vulnerable to frostbite. You glance around the cabin, noticing how even furniture placement contributes to heat distribution. Benches, trunks, and makeshift tables are often arranged to form a barrier against drafts, or to create pockets where heat pools. Evidence points to the understanding that every surface and obstacle could influence airflow and thermal comfort. Some settlers use stacked firewood along walls, a dual-purpose strategy, ready fuel for the hearth, and added insulation against cold winds pressing through gaps. You probably won't realize how effective this simple tactic is until you feel the difference between an exposed wall and one buffered with wood and textiles. The air carries a blend of warmth and faint smoke, a mixture that reminds you of countless nights spent in similar conditions. Frontier experience shows that the smell of burning wood, mingled with the earthy aroma of furs and quilts, had a psychological effect as much as a physical one, providing reassurance and a sense of security. Observations from the period reveal that even subtle changes like the placement of a drying rag or the addition of fresh hay to a mattress could enhance comfort and shield sleepers from cold drafts. You feel each breath drawing in warmth, each exhale dissolving tension as the cabin's layered protections perform their quiet work. You consider how settlers manage temperature throughout the night. Diaries recount that embers would be carefully banked, logs shifted, and small twigs added to maintain steady heat without producing excessive smoke. Some accounts suggest that the timing of these adjustments required an intimate understanding of the cabin's thermal rhythm, a practice honed over years. You listen to the fire's low crackle, imagining its influence spreading evenly across bedding blankets and furs, each detail supporting a night of endurance. Scholars still debate whether these methods were standardized or improvised according to personal preference, yet their effectiveness is undeniable. You shift slightly, testing the comfort of your layered bedding, and realize how movement and positioning interact with insulation. Anecdotal reports describe settlers curling or spreading their limbs strategically to conserve warmth, sometimes even huddling against others for maximum body heat. Evidence points to the value of subtle adjustments throughout the night, and the combination of textiles, furs, and strategic placement of sleepers created a microclimate within the cabin resilient against the freezing air beyond. You feel the embrace of these layers, the culmination of centuries of learned experience, and understand the quiet genius of frontier warmth. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the hush of snow outside and the soft, steady heat pressing against your body. Diaries recount that even in the coldest conditions, settlers found ways to rest deeply, their breathing synchronized with the gentle crackle of embers and the protective cocoon of blankets and furs. Some accounts suggest that mental adaptation, repetition routine, and attention to tactile comfort was as crucial as physical materials for surviving the night. Frontier experience shows that the combination of layered bedding, thoughtful clothing, and attentive hearth management allowed humans to endure conditions that might seem insurmountable today. You feel the interplay of all these elements, a carefully orchestrated dance of warmth, comfort, and quiet vigilance settling you deeper into the rhythm of the cabin night. You tug your coat tighter, feeling how your layered garments cling to skin and provide an invisible shield against the penetrating cold. The cabin walls seem to hold you, but your clothing acts as the first line of defense, and you probably won't realize its importance until a sudden draft brushes past your shoulders. Frontier experience shows that settlers relied heavily on wool flannel and homespun fabrics, sometimes sleeping in multiple layers to trap warmth efficiently. Records indicate that adults and children alike wore full-day clothing to bed, preserving heat and reducing the risk of frostbite. You run your fingers along the fabric of a thick wool shirt, noting how soft it has become from repeated washing and years of wear, yet still remarkably resilient. Diaries recount that some families even wore stockings and mittens to bed during the coldest months, a quirky yet practical solution to maintain extremity warmth. Experts continue to debate whether these additional layers provided significant benefit or if they primarily offered psychological comfort. You probably won't appreciate the subtle difference until you curl your toes under the covers and feel the insulating effect in real time. Observations from the period reveal that layering was both functional and adaptive. Outer layers could be removed if the fire blazed strongly, or additional blankets were added when embers dimmed. You notice the variation in textures and weights among garments. Frontier experience shows that heavier outer coats, often made of buffalo or bear hide, were supplemented with softer inner layers like linen or thin wool, creating pockets of trapped air that preserved body heat. Some accounts suggest that settlers experimented with different combinations, sometimes adding a vest or scarf to direct warmth toward the torso. You tug at your collar, imagining the heat circulation that occurs when layers are carefully arranged, each piece contributing in subtle, almost unnoticed ways. Diaries recount families instructing children to wear multiple shirts and trousers to bed, a practice that seems excessive now, but was grounded in necessity. Anecdotal reports describe settlers sometimes stuffing clothes with dried grasses or feathers to provide additional insulation, a fringe technique that blurred the line between clothing and bedding. You run your hand along a thick wool coat, feeling the firmness created by decades of use, imagining it pressed gently against a body, conserving every precious degree of warmth. Frontier experience shows that such improvisations were not uncommon, and ingenuity often emerged from necessity rather than instruction. You probably won't survive the night unprepared without similar attention to layering and material choice. You consider the placement of garments relative to the fire. Diaries recount that clothes were often arranged to dry and warm before bedtime, ensuring that moisture from previous wear did not sap heat during the night. Some accounts suggest that even small actions like draping a coat over a chair near the hearth could make a significant difference in comfort. Observations from the period reveal that this practice extended beyond clothing. Blankets, furs, and even hats were rotated for warmth, a dynamic approach to survival in a constantly changing thermal environment. Records indicate that settlers paid close attention to the way clothing conformed to the body. Snug-fitting garments trapped heat more effectively, while loose layers allowed for airflow but required additional coverage. You probably won't notice it at first, but each fold, tuck, and adjustment impacted how well your body retained warmth. Diaries recount that individuals often shifted positions during the night, adjusting layers for optimal comfort, a practice that underscores the nuanced understanding settlers had of insulation and body heat management. Some accounts suggest that settlers even wore boots or moccasins to bed, especially when floors were particularly cold or drafty. You can imagine the sensation of leather against skin, a firm barrier to icy boards combined with the softness of quilts and furs above. Anecdotal reports describe children wearing multiple pairs of socks, sometimes dampened slightly for comfort, a curious technique that may have combined warmth with localized humidity management. Experts continue to debate the effectiveness of such practices, but the consistency with which they appear in diaries and letters indicates their widespread use. You notice how layers also protected against sudden shifts in temperature, such as when doors opened or wind gusted through cracks. Frontier experience shows that settlers learned to respond quickly, adding a scarf or shawl at night if the cabin cooled unexpectedly. Observations from the period reveal that this adaptability was critical. Even brief exposure to cold air could sap body heat, making the careful management of clothing a constant concern. You probably won't survive the coldest nights without similar vigilance, and the strategy extends beyond materials to timing placement and attention to subtle environmental cues. Anecdotal reports describe small garments tucked into beds to shield specific areas like gloves near the hands or scarves around the neck, forming a microcosm of insulation within the broader layered system. Diaries recount that even sleeping caps, though seemingly quaint, served a vital function in heat retention, preventing valuable warmth from escaping through the head. Some accounts suggest that settlers encouraged children to sleep fully dressed, both for protection and to maintain the overall warmth of the shared bedding space. You feel the layered complexity of this strategy as a living system, each element interacting with others to sustain life during long freezing nights. Records indicate that settlers often considered clothing in tandem with bedding, recognizing that blankets and furs enhance the effectiveness of nightwear. Frontier experience shows that the combination of multiple layers of clothing and carefully arranged textiles created a thermal environment remarkably stable, despite external extremes. Diaries recount subtle rituals such as smoothing a quilt over a child or adjusting a coat over the shoulders before sleep that reinforced warmth and comfort. You probably won't survive the cold with only one layer. It is the interplay of fabrics, textures, and positioning that makes endurance possible. Observations from the period reveal a deeply intuitive understanding of human thermodynamics practiced nightly in the quiet intimacy of frontier cabins. You finally lean back, feeling the cumulative effect of all these layers pressing warmth into your body. The room hums with a quiet comfort. Firelight dances on quilts, furs press softly against skin, and the cabin itself seems to hold every degree of heat in careful balance. Anecdotal reports describe the subtle satisfaction of settling into such a cocoon, a relief that reaches beyond physical comfort into the psychological assurance of preparedness. Diaries recount that many settlers would sigh, relax, and let sleep take them, fully trusting their layered strategies to guard against the icy air just beyond the walls. You probably won't appreciate the full elegance of this arrangement until you experience it yourself, but the principles remain clear. Thoughtful layering, careful material choice, and attentive management of clothing are central to surviving the coldest nights in a Wild West cabin. You shift slightly on the mattress, feeling the subtle warmth radiating from both your clothing and the surrounding blankets. Your stomach reminds you of another essential layer of protection against the cold food. You probably won't realize just how crucial caloric intake was until your body starts signaling fatigue, shivering in a way that blankets alone cannot fix. Frontier experience shows that settlers relied on high-calorie meals before bedtime, often combining dried meats, beans, grains, and fats to ensure energy stores would sustain them through the long freezing night. Records indicate that porridge with added lard, salted meats, or even preserved fruits was common, designed not for luxury, but for thermal necessity. Diaries recount quirky mealtime practices like placing a small portion of hardtack near the hearth to allow it to warm slightly before eating, turning a simple biscuit into a comforting, heat-infused bite. You probably won't appreciate the psychological reassurance this brought, as the warmth of the food complemented the physical heat from clothing and fire. Experts continue to debate whether settlers were fully aware of the metabolic benefits of these meals, or if their choices were guided primarily by availability and tradition. Observations from the period reveal that timing was crucial. Consuming food shortly before sleep maximized body heat production through digestion, a natural internal furnace. You notice how settlers sometimes drank warm beverages to complement their meals, such as thin teas, watered-down coffee, or lightly spiced broths. Some accounts suggest that these liquids provided both hydration and gentle warmth, while fringe reports mention the occasional sip of diluted spirits, believed to encourage a feeling of heat. Frontier experience shows that moderation was key. Too much liquid could lead to uncomfortable trips outside during the night, while too little left the body at risk of dehydration, which impaired thermoregulation. You tug your own hands around a mug, imagining the slow infusion of heat into fingers and chest. Records indicate that high-protein foods were particularly valued as protein metabolism produces more heat than carbohydrates alone. You probably won't notice the subtle metabolic shift, but it works quietly, turning ordinary dinner into a strategic element of survival. Diaries recount the odd habit of eating cold portions of preserved meat or salted fish before bedding down, reasoning that any additional energy conversion was a net gain against the cold. Observations from the period reveal a delicate balance. Overeating could weigh down the body, reducing circulation, while undereating left individuals vulnerable to hypothermia. Anecdotal reports describe settlers preparing small snacks for the middle of the night, such as nuts, dried berries, or leftover bread, placing them near sleeping areas. Frontier experience shows that these simple portable caloric sources allowed for quick replenishment of energy if the fire cooled or the night became unexpectedly harsh. Experts continue to debate whether these nocturnal rations were widespread or limited to certain regions with particularly long winters. You imagine reaching for a handful of dried beans, feeling both comfort and vitality restored in the cold darkness. You watch the smoke rise gently from the hearth, carrying faint aromas of previous cooking sessions. Diaries recount that the smell of food lingering in the air had a calming, almost hypnotic effect, reinforcing warmth psychologically as much as physiologically. You probably won't notice the subtle interplay unless you've spent hours immersed in the environment, but your body responds digestion. Comfort and sensory pleasure converge into a steady heat-generating rhythm. Observations from the period reveal that families often coordinated meals to coincide with the fire's peak warmth, ensuring that the metabolic benefit of eating aligned with external heat distribution. Records indicate that certain preserved foods were strategically rationed for the harshest periods. Frontier experience shows that high-fat items like rendered tallow suet and preserved nuts were consumed at night to produce prolonged metabolic warmth. Some accounts suggest that these small portions were sometimes layered between meals to maintain a continuous source of heat. Diaries recount children occasionally sneaking extra pieces, providing temporary warmth and satisfaction, a small act of agency in an otherwise rigid survival routine. You tug a piece of jerky toward you, feeling the faint but immediate comfort it offers, both tactile and energetic. Anecdotal reports describe settlers eating slowly, savouring textures and flavours to maximise digestion and warmth generation. Experts continue to debate whether this deliberate pacing was intentional for thermal benefit or simply cultural habit. Yet the effect remains evident. The body converts energy more efficiently when food is processed calmly, and the process itself contributes to a sense of comfort. You probably won't survive the night effectively if you ignore the strategic role of calories and timing. Observations from the period reveal that meals and snacks were as much tools of survival as blankets or firewood. You consider how families coordinated cooking and fire management with mealtime. Diaries recount that pots were left near embers to slowly warm over hours, creating ready-to-eat meals without risking a full loss of heat from the hearth. Some accounts suggest that placing a kettle just off-centre allowed residual heat to circulate throughout the cabin, combining nutrition and thermal management seamlessly. Frontier experience shows that even small actions like stirring porridge or rotating meat near the fire had outsized effects on warmth and endurance. You probably won't realize how critical these techniques were until you feel the subtle difference in energy and comfort. Records indicate that settlers often prepared slightly larger evening meals than strictly necessary, understanding that digestive heat was a crucial ally. Anecdotal reports describe families sharing food, strategically ensuring that children, the elderly, and the most vulnerable consumed sufficient calories. Observations from the period reveal a remarkable foresight, combining nutrition, fire heat, and physical exertion to maintain a sustainable, comfortable temperature in the cabin. You lean back against the blankets, imagining the careful planning behind each simple meal, and feel the quiet interplay of body food and environment, gently fortifying you against the long night ahead. You shift your position slightly on the mattress, feeling the weight of your limbs pressed gently into the layers of blankets and furs. Your body begins to adapt, seeking positions that retain heat most effectively, and you probably won't realize how intentional this is until you notice the subtle warmth spreading from core to extremities. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often curled, tucked, or layered themselves to conserve energy, with each adjustment affecting how heat circulated around their bodies. Diaries recount children being positioned between adults or near walls to reduce exposure, a quiet choreography aimed at maximizing survival during bitter nights. Settlers often recognized the value of body mechanics as a form of insulation. Some accounts suggest that bending the knees toward the chest, crossing arms over the torso, or even huddling together with family members created natural heat pockets, turning the simple act of sleeping into a strategic exercise. Frontier experience shows that these positions were particularly effective when combined with layered blankets and furs, creating a microclimate that could offset even extreme external temperatures. You tug a thick quilt higher, imagining how the subtle redistribution of body mass and fabric could be the difference between discomfort and hypothermia. You notice how the choice of sleeping surfaces played a role in warmth retention. Evidence points to settlers often using straw-dried grasses or layered cloth beneath and around sleeping areas to create a soft insulating barrier from the cold wooden floor. Diaries recount families constructing raised platforms or simple bed frames, further reducing direct contact with freezing surfaces. Some accounts suggest that occasional placement of heated stones beneath bedding provided supplemental warmth, a fringe practice that offered tangible benefits despite seeming odd to modern sensibilities. You probably won't survive the coldest nights without attention to extremities. Diaries recount that socks, mittens, and even sleeping caps were commonly worn with careful attention paid to circulation. Anecdotal reports describe children sometimes sleeping with small heated cloths near their feet, a makeshift technique to prevent frostbite. Frontier experience shows that the combination of strategic positioning and protective clothing was a sophisticated, albeit improvised, method to maintain body warmth. Observations from the period reveal that these practices varied by region, family preference and resource availability, yet their principles remained consistent. Warmth had to be preserved from core to extremities. Settlers often timed movements and adjustments throughout the night to adapt to temperature fluctuations. Records indicate that subtle changes in postular repositioning or small shifts in proximity to the fire could dramatically alter perceived warmth. Some accounts suggest that restless sleepers would rotate positions every hour or so, distributing heat more evenly and avoiding cold spots. Diaries recount that this careful monitoring of the body's response to environment was often learned through experience becoming second nature over years of enduring harsh winters. You notice how even small, almost imperceptible actions contributed to survival. Frontier experience shows that covering the face partially with a blanket, tucking arms close to the body, or resting a pet nearby could add measurable warmth. Some accounts suggest that certain families trained children to maintain these positions without waking, fully preserving heat, quietly, while maintaining rest. Observations from the period reveal a blend of instinct and learned behavior, demonstrating settlers' adaptive ingenuity in the face of environmental stress. You probably won't appreciate how subtle variations in bedding and body positioning influence airflow and warmth until you watch the room settle into silence. Diaries recount that slight drafts could be mitigated by adjusting quilts or placing furs strategically around the sleeper. Evidence points to the fact that these careful arrangements allowed the cabin's thermal energy to concentrate where it was most needed, forming protective pockets of warmth. Some accounts suggest that settlers even positioned themselves to shield one another from exposure, turning shared space into a collective survival strategy. Settlers often combined these techniques with nighttime rituals that reinforced comfort. Observations from the period reveal practices such as gently smoothing blankets over children, adjusting quilts to catch residual fire heat, and ensuring that garments remained snug yet breathable. Anecdotal reports describe adults checking on each other's positioning during the night not out of concern alone, but as a deliberate method to maintain collective warmth. Frontier experience shows that these routines, while subtle, contributed significantly to endurance and overall comfort in extreme conditions. You feel the cumulative effect of these strategies as the cabin seems to hum with quiet energy. Records indicate that the combination of body positioning, layered clothing, and carefully arranged bedding allowed settlers to survive nights that might otherwise have been fatal. You probably won't fully appreciate this until you experience the gentle, persistent warmth generated by these simple, coordinated actions. Diaries recount a sense of satisfaction and security that arose from mastering one's own movements in relation to the cabin and its hearth, a testament to human adaptability and attentiveness. Finally, you settle fully into the blankets, aligning limbs to maximize contact with furs and adjacent bodies. Evidence points to the fact that even subtle shifts in posture or layering could affect the overall thermal balance, reinforcing the delicate interplay of environment materials and human behavior. Frontier experience shows that sleep was never passive, but an active engagement with the surrounding cold. Some accounts suggest that these practices, refined over generations, were shared orally within families and communities, forming a collective knowledge that ensured survival. You probably won't notice the full intricacy of these adaptations at first, but as warmth envelops your body, the genius of human endurance becomes quietly evident. You move toward the window, letting your fingers trace the rough frame as moonlight filters through frosted glass. Outside, the wind whistles across the landscape, sculpting drifts and rattling loose shingles. Yet inside the cabin, the sound is muffled, softened by walls, quilts, and furs. You probably won't realize just how important windows were in regulating cabin warmth until you feel the difference between a sealed frame and a drafty one. Records indicate that settlers often used oiled paper cloth or thin animal skins to cover windows, reducing airflow while allowing faint light to filter in. Observations from the period reveal that such coverings were critical in preventing heat loss during the coldest nights, a subtle but essential form of insulation. Settlers often employed shutters or boards over windows to create an additional barrier. Some accounts suggest that during particularly fierce storms, these shutters were propped against the inside, blocking even minimal drafts. Frontier experience shows that the precise layering of window coverings could dramatically affect indoor temperature, especially in cabins with single-pane glass or gaps between logs. You probably won't appreciate the ingenuity until you notice how small changes in light or draft can alter the perception of warmth. Anecdotal reports describe settlers inserting straw cloth or even old newspapers around the edges of window frames to fill gaps. Diaries recount that these improvisations were often temporarily adjusted nightly, depending on the wind and snow accumulation. Evidence points to the effectiveness of these techniques, which combined readily available materials to minimize the penetration of cold air. You run your fingers along the frost forming on the interior surface, and imagine the layers acting like a slow protective blanket holding precious heat where it mattered most. You notice the subtle interplay between window placement and furniture arrangement. Observations from the period reveal that beds, tables, and storage chests were often positioned to buffer drafts or capture residual warmth from the hearth. Some accounts suggest that families even hung quilts over windows partially at night, both to insulate and to maintain privacy. Frontier experience shows that these careful arrangements were part of a holistic approach to indoor climate control, combining materials, furniture, and strategic placement. Some settlers added reflective surfaces near windows to redirect light and heat into the room. Diaries recount makeshift tin panels or polished metal sheets positioned behind window coverings, a technique believed to boost internal warmth without additional fuel. Experts continue to debate the prevalence of these methods, but anecdotal reports describe the tangible benefits, particularly on long nights when every degree of warmth counted. You probably won't notice it at first, but the combination of reflection insulation and careful coverage creates an environment where heat is conserved efficiently. Records indicate that exterior elements influenced indoor comfort as well. Frontier experience shows that the orientation of cabins, proximity to other structures, and natural windbreaks like trees or hills played a role in window management. Diaries recount settlers observing prevailing winds and adjusting window coverings accordingly, a subtle but essential practice. Some accounts suggest that even placing a small board at a slight angle could deflect cold air downward, reducing the chill that reached sleeping areas. You run a hand over the frosted pane and imagine the energy of wind interacting with these simple yet thoughtful defences. You probably won't survive the cold effectively without understanding the relationship between light air and warmth. Observations from the period reveal that windows were rarely purely decorative. Their function in temperature regulation was paramount. Some accounts suggest that settlers also used curtains or blankets to partition rooms, partially creating microclimates that enhanced comfort and allowed multiple occupants to share warmth efficiently. Diaries recount families adjusting coverings repeatedly throughout the evening, responding to changes in wind temperature and fire intensity. Anecdotal reports describe settlers applying oil grease or thin layers of wax to window surfaces to reduce frost accumulation. Evidence points to the practice's effectiveness in retaining heat and maintaining visibility, a practical measure in regions where snow and ice were relentless. Frontier experience shows that these small details, often improvised, contributed significantly to the overall strategy of indoor survival. You tug a quilt closer, imagining how these measures combined with fire bedding and clothing created a buffer against the extreme cold outside. Records indicate that some cabins had small secondary windows for ventilation or emergency access, which could be covered or uncovered as needed. Observations from the period reveal that these openings were carefully managed to balance airflow with insulation, preventing suffocating smoke accumulation while retaining warmth. Some accounts suggest that settlers even devised removable panels to adjust according to nightly conditions. You probably won't notice the full complexity of these arrangements at first, but as you watch the subtle play of frost and firelight, the careful orchestration of heat and draft becomes apparent. Finally, you step back from the window, feeling the warmth of the cabin flow gently around you. Diaries recount that settlers spent countless hours observing their environment, learning the nuances of light airflow and material interaction. Frontier experience shows that mastery of these details was crucial to comfort and survival, blending observation, improvisation, and tradition into a seamless strategy. You probably won't survive the harsh nights without such attentiveness, but within this cabin, each window curtain and improvised covering works quietly to hold the cold at bay, creating a safe and steady sanctuary. You approach the doorway, noticing the subtle gap between the door and the floor where cold air can sneak in. It presses against your toes and ankles, a gentle reminder that even the smallest openings can undermine warmth. Settlers often practice stuff in this space with old boots, rags, or bundles of straw, creating an improvised barrier against drafts. Diaries recount that families frequently rotated materials as they became damp or compacted, a simple yet effective method to prevent cold from seeping inside. Frontier experience shows that attention to such details was critical, especially during nights when temperatures plummeted well below freezing. Some accounts suggest that straw or dried grasses were preferred because they compressed easily and provided both insulation and a flexible seal. You probably won't realize just how effective this method is until you notice the difference between a sealed threshold and one left bare. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often combine these fillers with heavier door coverings or small wooden thresholds to maximize resistance against wind. Anecdotal reports describe tiny gaps being shored up with mud or clay during extreme storms, demonstrating the ingenuity and resourcefulness embedded in everyday life. You place a hand on the door, feeling the subtle movement of cold air attempting to enter. Historical documentation notes that even the most tightly fitted doors could still leak, especially after repeated seasonal expansion and contraction of wood. Diaries recount families checking doors before sleep, pressing materials firmly into place or adding temporary wedges to block drafts. Some accounts suggest that settlers sometimes layered additional rags or cloths along the bottom, a fringe yet practical solution that improved comfort and reduced heat loss over the course of a long night. Frontier experience shows that the doorway was more than just an entrance. It was a thermal threshold, a critical interface between interior warmth and exterior cold. Observations from the period reveal that small adjustments, shifting a rug, pressing a bundle of cloth tighter, or rearranging a boot could make the difference between a comfortable night and a restless one. You probably won't survive the harshest conditions without this level of vigilance, but within the cabin each minor tweak contributes to overall warmth in a surprisingly substantial way. Some accounts suggest that settlers also use secondary barriers like hanging cloths or lightweight blankets over the inside of doors to reduce airflow. Diaries recount the occasional improvised flap, sometimes weighted with small stones, or tucked into grooves that further stabilize temperature. Evidence points to these solutions being adopted more frequently in regions with longer, harsher winters, showing a pragmatic adaptation to environment. You can almost feel the effectiveness of these multiple layers as warmth presses gently back against the chill attempting to creep in. You probably won't appreciate the sensory difference until you notice how subtle shifts in door ceiling influence comfort. Diaries recount that families routinely checked thresholds after heavy snowfalls or gusting winds, adjusting materials to prevent cold pockets from forming near sleeping areas. Anecdotal reports describe careful inspection routines, sometimes involving tapping along the base to detect draft, illustrating a deliberate engagement with the cabin's thermal envelope. Frontier experience shows that such attentiveness was learned behavior passed down orally through generations of settlers who understood that survival depended on attention to detail. Some sources claim that layering heavier objects near doorways like small trunks crates or even firewood could serve a dual purpose, blocking drafts and adding heat-retentive mass. Observations from the period reveal that these strategies were often combined with straw or cloth fillers, creating a multi-tiered defense against the night's chill. Diaries recount settlers adjusting these arrangements throughout the winter, responding to changes in wind direction, snow accumulation, or the performance of the fireplace. You probably won't notice how quietly these tactics reinforce warmth, but the results are palpable. The interior remains a sanctuary despite the relentless cold beyond the cabin walls. You reach out to smooth a rag tucked beneath the door, feeling the slight give as it presses against the floor. Frontier experience shows that every layer, no matter how small, contributes to a cumulative effect that dramatically improves indoor comfort. Diaries recount families taking these precautions seriously, understanding that a single weak point could compromise hours of careful heat management. Some accounts suggest that even pets resting near doorways contributed to this barrier, their body heat adding to the insulation. You probably won't realize the full synergy of these measures until you experience the warmth preserved through seemingly minor deliberate actions. Finally, you step back from the doorway and feel the cabin envelop you in gentle warmth. Observations from the period reveal that settlers' management of thresholds was part of a broader system, integrating clothing, bedding, window coverings, and strategic use of the hearth. Anecdotal reports describe nights where such attention allowed entire families to rest comfortably, despite sub-zero temperatures. Records indicate that the careful layering of materials at doors was an unspoken yet critical skill for anyone hoping to survive the longest, coldest nights. You probably won't notice the genius behind these simple measures at first, but as the warmth settles around you, it becomes evident that survival is a product of both ingenuity and persistence. You turn your attention back to the hearth, noticing how smoke curls lazily upward, carrying a faint aroma that mingles with the earthy scent of logs and straw. The fire's heat spreads slowly yet reliably, a reminder that managing it carefully is as crucial as stacking the right amount of wood. Records indicate that settlers often balance the size and type of logs to maintain consistent warmth, choosing seasoned hardwoods for slow-enduring embers and softer woods for quick ignition. You probably won't realize just how much thought went into this until you feel the difference between a fire that blazes briefly and one that sustains warmth steadily through the night. Some accounts suggest that families adjusted hearth placement and fire intensity according to the cabin's layout, ensuring heat reached sleeping areas while minimizing smoke inhalation. Diaries recount settlers moving furniture or bedding closer during particularly harsh nights, a simple yet effective method of directing warmth where it was most needed. Frontier experience shows that even subtle changes like repositioning a log or stacking small twigs around embers could influence the overall temperature gradient within the cabin. You notice the fire's interaction with surrounding materials. Observations from the period reveal that stones, bricks, or metal objects placed near or inside the hearth absorbed heat and radiated its slowly extending comfort long after flames subsided. Anecdotal reports describe families lining hearths with stones collected from nearby streams, a practice combining practicality and resourcefulness. You probably won't appreciate the effect until you feel the residual warmth seeping into blankets, furs, and clothing, a subtle but powerful aid in enduring freezing nights. Some sources claim that settlers occasionally use small metal containers or pots to transfer embers to sleeping areas, creating localized heat zones without risking sparks or fire. Diaries recount careful monitoring of such methods with adjustments made to prevent overexposure or accidental burns. Frontier experience shows that these techniques required attentiveness, reinforcing the idea that surviving winter nights was not passive, but an active engagement with one's environment. You notice how the placement of cooking implements also contributed to warmth. Evidence points to kettles, pots and pans left near the embers slowly releasing heat into the surrounding air while preserving food. Some accounts suggest that this practice served multiple purposes. It allowed for early breakfast, preparation, extended heat retention, and even improved the cabin's air quality by distributing gentle warmth throughout the room. Diaries recount that families monitored these arrangements, closely adjusting positions as fuel burned down or the night's cold shifted. Frontier experience shows that the timing of fire maintenance was just as important as placement. Settlers often banked embers before sleep, adding small twigs or kindling as needed to prevent sudden cooling. Some accounts suggest that individuals would rise briefly in the night to stoke the fire, ensuring a consistent thermal environment. Observations from the period reveal a delicate balance between maintaining warmth and avoiding smoke accumulation, requiring both skill and experience. You probably won't notice the psychological effect of the hearth at first, but diaries recount that the gentle crackle and flicker created a calming, almost hypnotic ambiance. This subtle comfort contributed as much to perceived warmth as the physical heat itself. Evidence points to the idea that maintaining fire was as much a ritual of reassurance as a practical survival measure, blending human perception with material necessity. Some accounts suggest that settlers experimented with hearth design, adding small reflective surfaces behind embers, or arranging stones to direct heat towards sleeping areas. Frontier experience shows that these innovations, though simple, enhanced comfort dramatically. Diaries recount nights where such modifications allowed entire families to sleep more soundly, protected from the harsh winds and plunging temperatures outside. You probably won't realize the full impact of these subtle interventions until you feel warmth radiating evenly across the cabin floor and up into bedding layers. Anecdotal reports describe settlers using residual embers to heat small items like stones or cloths, placing them under bedding to provide focused warmth. Observations from the period reveal that this practice, combined with careful clothing and bedding arrangements, created a controlled microclimate within the cabin. Some sources claim that this was especially common in regions with prolonged sub-zero temperatures, demonstrating the settlers' adaptability and ingenuity in leveraging every available resource. Finally, you settle into the glow of the hearth, appreciating the careful orchestration of fire materials and human behaviour, diaries recount the quiet satisfaction of watching embers hold steady through the night, knowing that warmth was preserved not just by flame but through thoughtful interaction with the cabin environment. Frontier experience shows that managing fire effectively was central to surviving winter nights, a skill honed through observation, trial and experience. You probably won't survive the harshest cold without such attention, yet here within the walls of timber and the glow of embers you feel the harmony of heat, vigilance and quiet human ingenuity. You rise quietly from your bedding, mindful of the way each step creaks against the rough floorboards. The cold outside seems to press harder through the logs, now reminding you that even inside, survival requires attention to subtle tasks. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often performed nighttime chores before settling fully, such as checking the fire, replenishing water, or briefly attending to livestock. Diaries recount that these activities were timed carefully to minimize exposure to the bitter air while maximizing the comfort and safety of everyone in the cabin. You probably won't realize how essential these small movements are until you feel the difference they make in preserving warmth and preventing frostbite. Records indicate that hauling water from nearby wells or melting snow indoors was a routine yet critical task. Frontier experience shows that settlers needed a small supply to cook, wash, and maintain hygiene, particularly during extended storms when venturing outdoors could be life-threatening. Some accounts suggest that families would set aside containers of warm water near the fire to prevent freezing, a simple but effective strategy that required foresight and diligence. You reach for a small bucket, imagining the careful balance between warmth retention and preparation for the next meal or washing. Diaries recount that minor fire maintenance was another essential chore. Even a short lapse could allow embers to cool too much, leaving the cabin chilly. Some accounts suggest that settlers used small branches or twigs for a slow, controlled burn during the night, preserving heat without producing excess smoke. Observations from the period reveal that such attention to detail, while seemingly mundane, was a cornerstone of survival in frontier cabins, especially during the coldest months. You probably won't appreciate the full importance until you feel the subtle difference in warmth that results from steady embers versus a fire allowed to wane. You notice the arrangement of tools and materials for nighttime tasks. Frontier experience shows that objects like buckets, brushes or tongs were kept near the hearth or sleeping areas to reduce unnecessary exposure to cold. Diaries recount that families often rehearsed these movements during the day to create efficient routines for nighttime chores. Some accounts suggest that pets like dogs or cats were trained to assist indirectly, such as by keeping watch or warming areas of the cabin that were otherwise drafty. You probably won't realize how this quiet coordination preserves both warmth and safety until you observe it in practice. Anecdotal reports describe settlers performing minor repairs during the night, such as reinforcing door seals or adjusting window coverings. Observations from the period reveal that such proactive maintenance was crucial. Even a small gap could allow cold to seep in, undermining all other insulation efforts. Some sources claim that settlers developed informal checklists in their minds, mentally walking through the cabin to ensure each weak point was addressed before returning to sleep. You feel the careful thought embedded in these seemingly small routines, a testament to human ingenuity and attentiveness. You probably won't appreciate the role of ambient heat in performing chores until you notice how proximity to the fire transforms simple tasks into manageable routines. Diaries recount that settlers positioned themselves strategically, using warmth from embers to dry damp clothing, melt snow or prepare food without exposure to freezing air. Records indicate that even a brief lapse in such positioning could result in cold-related discomfort or slow progress on essential chores. Frontier experience shows that mastery of these movements was as important as the physical materials in the cabin for enduring long frigid nights. Some accounts suggest that nighttime chores also included attending to animals in nearby pens or stables, particularly in harsh weather. Observations from the period reveal that settlers would sometimes warm water for animals' repair fences or provide feed without venturing far into the storm. Diaries recount that these actions were carefully timed to coincide with periods of minimal wind or lighter snowfall. You probably won't realize the subtle interplay between indoor warmth and outdoor responsibilities until you imagine the coordination required to maintain both. You notice the subtle ritual of stacking or arranging fuel for the next day. Frontier experience shows that even the order and accessibility of firewood could impact morning warmth. Diaries recount families pre-sorting logs by size and dryness, ensuring that starting the next fire would be quick and efficient. Some accounts suggest that small bundles of kindling were placed near sleeping areas for immediate use, a simple adaptation born from repeated necessity. You feel the calm reassurance this preparation provides an invisible safeguard against the unpredictability of cold nights. Records indicate that settlers also tended to small personal comfort tasks such as drying damp mittens, smoothing blankets, or repositioning furs. Observations from the period reveal that these subtle actions, while minor in effort, had significant cumulative impact on comfort and survival. Diaries recount the quiet satisfaction of knowing that each detail had been attended to ensuring a smoother night's rest. You probably won't appreciate how these tiny adjustments maintain overall warmth until you feel the effect of a cabin harmoniously arranged for endurance. Finally, you settle back near the hearth after completing the brief round of chores. Some accounts suggest that the mental preparation and physical movement involved in nighttime tasks also contributed to warmth, as body heat increased circulation and primed the body for restful sleep. Frontier experience shows that the combination of anticipation routine and minor exertion formed a subtle yet effective thermal strategy. Diaries recount the sense of reassurance that arose from knowing everything had been managed, every weak point addressed, and that the cabin fire and inhabitants were ready for the night ahead. You probably won't survive as comfortably without this careful attention to detail, but within the orchestrated rhythm of chores, fire and bedding, warmth is preserved, life is maintained, and the night continues safely. You stretch your fingers, feeling the rough texture of straw and quilted fabrics beneath your palms, and notice how the cold air brushes slightly across exposed skin. Your attention drifts to the subtle rituals settlers practiced to maintain hygiene and skin health, a surprisingly important part of surviving winter nights. Observations from the period reveal that dry chapped skin and frostbite were constant threats, and settlers employed a variety of techniques to protect themselves. Diaries recount the application of animal fats tallow, or simple herbal balms to hands, face, and exposed necks, a practice both pragmatic and surprisingly effective. You probably won't realize the significance until you notice the immediate sensation of warmth and protection such applications provide. Records indicate that frequent washing, often with cold water or heated water from the hearth, was maintained despite the chill. Frontier experience shows that settlers understood the balance between cleanliness and exposure, using minimal water to prevent hypothermia while still tending to basic hygiene. Some accounts suggest that herbs like sage, rosemary, or pine needles were added to water for mild antiseptic or soothing properties, a practice blending practicality with subtle care. Diaries recount that even a brief rinse could invigorate the skin, increase circulation, and offer a comforting ritual before sleep. You probably won't appreciate the role of clothing in skin protection until you notice how layers serve not only to trap heat, but also to buffer delicate surfaces from cold drafts. Anecdotal reports describe settlers wearing long-sleeve shirts, wool leggings, and mittens throughout the night, minimizing the risk of frostbite, while also providing gentle pressure that improved blood flow. Observations from the period reveal that even slight adjustments such as tucking sleeves under blankets or pulling socks higher contributed measurably to comfort and survival. Frontier experience shows that attention to these small details was a learned behavior, passed from parent to child through demonstration and habit. Some accounts suggest that settlers also monitored moisture, taking care to dry hands, face and clothing before bed. Diaries recount that dampness could dramatically increase the risk of cold-related ailments, so small routines like shaking out socks, rotating quilts, or brushing off snow from boots became vital. Evidence points to a consistent understanding that warmth depended not only on layers, but also on maintaining dryness, a principle subtly reinforced in daily practice. You probably won't realize the cumulative effect of these small interventions until the chill is offset by meticulous preparation. Records indicate that even hair and scalp care played a role. Observations from the period reveal that hair was braided or covered with cloths to prevent heat loss, and scalp rubs with oils or fats were occasionally used to reduce dryness and cracking. Diaries recount that settlers recognized the importance of these practices in maintaining comfort during nights when temperatures could drop drastically. Frontier experience shows that attention to small, often overlooked areas, like the scalp or hands, reflected a comprehensive approach to cold weather survival, blending practicality and preventive care. Anecdotal reports describe children being encouraged to rub their cheeks or hands together, generating warmth before sleeping. Some accounts suggest that these actions, seemingly playful, had a dual purpose: warming extremities and establishing a routine of mindfulness about body temperature. Observations from the period reveal that families often created informal teaching moments around such practices, blending education with survival strategy. You probably won't appreciate how deeply these small gestures affect endurance until you feel the subtle heat generated from repeated gentle movements. Settlers often prepared simple balms or ointments from available ingredients like animal fat plant extracts or wax for skin protection. Diaries recount the preparation and careful application of these substances before bed, especially during prolonged cold spells. Frontier experience shows that these methods provided both insulation and a barrier against drying winds entering through small cracks in the cabin walls. Some accounts suggest that these rituals offered psychological comfort, signaling to the body that care and preparation were in place, reinforcing resilience. You notice the layering of these practices with clothing and bedding. Evidence points to a sophisticated integration: hands rubbed with fat covered in mittens, faces smeared lightly protected by scarves, feet dried and layered in socks beneath quilts. Observations from the period reveal that the combination of preventive care clothing and bedding created a coordinated defense against cold, minimizing the risk of frostbite and other winter ailments. You probably won't survive comfortably without attention to this integrated approach, yet the methods are simple and grounded in resourcefulness. Some accounts suggest that even subtle adjustments during the night, shifting a sleeve, moving a blanket, or tucking gloves under quilts, could prevent chilling and maintain circulation. Diaries recount the awareness settlers had of body temperature fluctuations, a quiet mindfulness that blended seamlessly with their environment. Frontier experience shows that these tiny movements, when repeated nightly, became a natural part of enduring long frigid hours. You feel the cumulative effect of all these measures, a quiet network of care and adaptation, as warmth continues to seep steadily through clothing, bedding and body. Finally, you lean back against the layers of quilts and furs, noting how the combination of hygiene practices, skin protection, and layered clothing creates an environment conducive to sleep. Observations from the period reveal that settlers' attentiveness to small details, dryness, insulation, and minor rituals played a significant role in their ability to endure harsh winters. Diaries recount a subtle satisfaction in these preparations, a knowledge that every precaution, however minor, contributed to comfort and survival. You probably won't fully appreciate the depth of these practices until you feel the harmony of body clothing and environment working together against the cold. You notice the soft breathing of companions nearby their presence, adding an almost imperceptible layer of warmth to the cabin. Frontier experience shows that humans huddling together, whether family members or trusted pets, created shared heat that could significantly improve comfort during the coldest nights. Diaries recount that children often slept between adults or pets, a strategy that both preserved warmth and offered emotional reassurance. You probably won't realize the subtle efficiency of this communal heat until you feel it pressing gently around your body, a quiet living barrier against the icy air beyond the walls. Some accounts suggest that the presence of animals, particularly dogs or cats, contributed meaningfully to survival. Records indicate that their small bodies radiated heat into sleeping areas, and anecdotal reports describe settlers tucking pets beneath quilts or alongside children for added warmth. Observations from the period reveal that pets served a dual role: companions for emotional comfort and practical sources of body heat. You probably won't notice the subtle difference until you sense the gentle, steady warmth shared between human and animal. You shift slightly to feel the weight of another person's arm brushing against you, a reminder that huddling was both instinctive and strategic. Diaries recount that families often rearrange sleeping positions throughout the night, adjusting according to wind, direction, fire intensity, or individual comfort levels. Evidence points to the fact that these small shifts repeated nightly maximize the retention of body heat across the cabin. Some accounts suggest that even minor movements like curling or stretching arms and legs were carefully timed to maintain equilibrium within the shared warmth. Settlers often considered airflow when sleeping near others. Observations from the period reveal that positioning against walls, corners or furniture created microclimates that reduced heat loss and minimized exposure to drafts. Diaries recount that the strategic arrangement of bodies within the cabin was an intuitive yet critical component of enduring prolonged cold. You probably won't appreciate the precision required until you feel how a single, poorly placed body can alter the circulation of heat across the sleeping area. Anecdotal reports describe the layering of blankets and furs over groups of sleepers, effectively creating thermal islands. Some accounts suggest that these islands allowed individuals who are more susceptible to cold, such as children or the elderly, to maintain core body temperature while the group collectively conserved energy. Records indicate that settlers observed the effects of these arrangements over years, refining positions and layering strategies for maximum comfort and efficiency. You probably won't notice the subtleties until you sense the difference in warmth distribution across a shared bed space. Evidence points to the importance of small adjustments throughout the night. Diaries recount that settlers would quietly shift blankets, straighten quilts, or nudge an adjacent body to prevent heat loss. Observations from the period reveal that these actions were often instinctive, honed through repeated experience, and essential to maintaining consistent warmth. Frontier experience shows that even minor misalignments could lead to discomfort or exposure, emphasizing the delicate balance achieved in a communal sleeping arrangement. Some accounts suggest that pets were sometimes strategically placed near doors or windows to block cold drafts, while adding warmth to the interior. Diaries recount that these arrangements served multiple purposes, maintaining thermal balance, protecting vulnerable areas, and offering companionship. Records indicate that settlers quickly learned to integrate animal behavior into the household survival strategy, using body heat and presence as a subtle but reliable resource. You probably won't realize how nuanced these tactics were until you sense the combination of warmth and subtle motion filling the cabin. Frontier experience shows that communal sleeping also reduced the need for additional firewood during the night. Observations from the period reveal that by conserving energy through shared heat, settlers could stretch limited fuel supplies further, a practical consideration when resources were scarce. Some accounts suggest that this method was crucial during extended storms or deep freezes, when trips outside for additional wood posed significant risks. Diaries recount nights where this technique allowed families to survive long stretches of sub-zero temperatures with minimal interruption to rest. You notice the quiet rhythm of the cabin, a combination of fire crackle breathing and shifting bodies creating a subtle symphony of endurance. Evidence points to the psychological as well as physical benefits of these arrangements. Diaries recount that huddled warmth fostered calm and reassurance, helping individuals maintain mental resilience alongside physical comfort. You probably won't appreciate how much this shared presence contributed to survival until you feel the steady pulse of warmth and notice your own body relaxing in response. Finally, you settle deeper into the layers of blankets, furs, and intertwined bodies, feeling the cumulative effect of this communal strategy. Observations from the period reveal that these practices, human and animal, together positioned thoughtfully adjusted subtly through the night, created an almost self-regulating system of warmth. Some accounts suggest that families who mastered this art of shared heat experienced not only greater physical comfort, but also a quiet sense of security that carried them through the harshest winters. You probably won't survive the coldest nights without recognizing the power of companionship, yet here enveloped in shared warmth, endurance becomes almost effortless. You glance around the cabin, noticing the thoughtful arrangement of furniture and belongings. Frontier experience shows that settlers did not position tables, beds, and storage randomly. Every item contributed to heat retention and the distribution of warmth. Diaries recount that placing beds near walls that absorbed fire heat or pushing trunks against drafts created small microclimates that improved comfort. You probably won't realize how much these adjustments mattered until you feel the subtle difference between a strategically arranged room and one left haphazard, where cold can seep unnoticed through gaps and corners. Records indicate that heavy furniture served a dual purpose: practical storage and acting as thermal barriers. Some accounts suggest that settlers lined walls with chests, crates, or benches, both to hold possessions and to slow the movement of cold air across the cabin floor. Observations from the period reveal that such layering was particularly valuable during blizzards or nights when wind pressure against walls threatened to undermine the modest insulation provided by logs and chinking. You probably won't notice the quiet ingenuity until you sense how the room's arrangement channels warmth efficiently towards sleeping areas. Anecdotal reports describe settlers arranging beds in L-shaped or corner positions, maximizing exposure to the hearth while reducing drafts from doors or windows. Diaries recount that cushions, furs, and blankets were used to extend the thermal barrier around sleeping spaces, forming an enclosed, cozy area where heat concentrated naturally. Frontier experience shows that even minor changes in positioning could dramatically affect comfort, and families adapted arrangements according to season, wind direction, and household size. Some accounts suggest that settlers intentionally left open floor space near the center of the cabin to allow warm air from the fire to circulate freely. Records indicate that this approach reduced cold pockets and prevented stagnation of heat around sleeping areas. Observations from the period reveal that families learned to balance the need for warmth with space for movement chores and cooking, a subtle integration of comfort and function. You probably won't appreciate how finely tuned this balance was until you notice the airflow patterns across the room and the gentle warmth spreading evenly from wall to wall. Evidence points to the use of hanging textiles as additional thermal modifiers. Diaries recount that quilts, furs, and even rugs were hung on walls or draped over doorways to block drafts and enhance insulation. Some accounts suggest that layering fabrics in this way created thermal zones within the cabin, enabling occupants to experience localized comfort even during extreme cold. Frontier experience shows that such practices were often refined over years, passed down, as intuitive knowledge rather than formal instruction. Observations from the period reveal that settlers also considered vertical space in their arrangements. Lofted sleeping platforms, shelves, and stacked supplies not only conserved floor area, but also influenced the movement of warm air, keeping bedding closer to heat sources while preventing cold air from pooling. Diaries recount families adjusting height and placement seasonally, responding to changes in fire intensity and outdoor temperatures. You probably won't realize the subtle impact until you notice how warmth rises and settles, filling the cabin more evenly. Some accounts suggest that reflective surfaces or light-colored fabrics were occasionally used to bounce firelight and heat into darker corners. Records indicate that even rudimentary experimentation with positioning could yield noticeable improvements in comfort. Frontier experience shows that these minor interventions, while seemingly aesthetic, had tangible survival benefits during prolonged cold snaps. Diaries recount settlers observing and refining such placements through repeated nights of trial and careful attention. Anecdotal reports describe the careful positioning of cooking equipment and water containers in relation to sleeping and living spaces. Some accounts suggest that pots, kettles, and pans near the hearth radiated gentle heat throughout the cabin, supplementing the main fire and aiding in maintaining stable temperatures. Observations from the period reveal that families often developed intuitive strategies for balancing warmth, food preparation, and safe movement within tight quarters, demonstrating both adaptability and foresight. Records indicate that additional small items like stools, crates, or bundles of firewood were often strategically placed to block drafts at floor level. Diaries recount settlers arranging these objects with awareness of prevailing winds and entry points, minimizing the intrusion of cold air. Frontier experience shows that every piece of furniture or supply could be used deliberately, creating a subtle but effective network of heat retention that complemented clothing, bedding, and the hearth. You probably won't notice the full orchestration at first, but as warmth circulates evenly across the cabin, the careful design becomes apparent. Finally, you settle back near the hearth and observe the harmony of the room. Observations from the period reveal that furniture, textiles, and thermal awareness were integrated seamlessly, creating a living system of comfort. Some accounts suggest that families who mastered cabin arrangement experienced more restful sleep and reduced exposure to cold-induced ailments. Diaries recount that such thoughtful placement combined with layered bedding, clothing, and fire management form the foundation of enduring even the harshest winter nights. You probably won't survive as comfortably without these strategies, yet here within these walls you feel the quiet effectiveness of deliberate design and human ingenuity. You lean back slightly, letting your eyes wander over the small innovations scattered around the cabin. Frontier experience shows that settlers were constantly experimenting with heating techniques, using whatever materials were available to improve comfort. Diaries recount families placing metal or brick panels near the hearth to reflect heat into corners, or arranging stones to retain warmth and radiate it slowly through the night. You probably won't realize the subtle brilliance of these adjustments until you notice how they extend the fire's effectiveness, making every ember count towards survival. Some accounts suggest that settlers used clay or mud to create small heat buffers around the hearth or under beds. Observations from the period reveal that these additions absorbed heat from the fire and released it gradually, keeping sleeping areas warmer, even after flames had dimmed. Records indicate that these techniques were especially valued in regions with prolonged sub-zero temperatures, demonstrating settlers' resourcefulness and adaptability. You feel the warmth lingering in these subtle interventions, a quiet testament to human ingenuity in the harshest conditions. Anecdotal reports describe the use of tin or polished metal panels to redirect warmth toward beds and seating areas. Diaries recount that families sometimes moved these reflective surfaces nightly, experimenting with angles to capture maximum heat from the fire. Frontier experience shows that even minor modifications could significantly affect comfort-reducing cold spots and creating pockets of cozy warmth. You probably won't notice the full effect until you feel the even distribution of heat radiating throughout the cabin. Evidence points to settlers using makeshift stoves or elevated grates to regulate heat intensity. Some accounts suggest that these innovations allowed fires to burn longer without constant attention, providing sustained warmth while reducing smoke inhalation. Observations from the period reveal that careful placement and stacking of logs and coals required both experience and intuition, a skill honed over years of observing fire behaviour. Diaries recount the satisfaction of a steady, well-maintained hearth offering both comfort and security against the night's chill. You notice small, unexpected details that contributed to warmth. Frontier experience shows that dried herbs, grasses or pine boughs were sometimes placed near fires or under bedding to trap heat and add gentle fragrance. Some accounts suggest that this practice also had psychological benefits, creating a sense of calm and familiarity amid the cold. Records indicate that these subtle touches were passed down through families as practical knowledge, blending sensory comfort with thermal strategy. You probably won't appreciate the full effect until you inhale the mixed aromas and feel the warmth permeating your surroundings. Anecdotal reports describe settlers arranging logs in crisscross or tiered patterns to encourage slow, steady burning. Diaries recount that this approach produced long-lasting embers, maximizing heat output without consuming excessive fuel. Frontier experience shows that fire management was an ongoing dynamic process, balancing fuel conservation with immediate warmth needs. You probably won't notice the careful attention required until you observe how embers behave differently with each subtle adjustment in log placement. Some accounts suggest that stones or bricks were placed atop or around embers to act as radiant heat reservoirs. Observations from the period reveal that these objects absorbed energy during the day or while the fire burned intensely and released it slowly during the coldest hours. Records indicate that settlers sometimes arranged stones near sleeping areas or under bedding to maintain a steady temperature gradient. You feel the slow radiance of stored warmth, a hidden ally against the night's chill. Frontier experience shows that even minor structural innovations improved thermal efficiency. Diaries recount that small tin shields, mud barriers or improvised flues were tested and adjusted over seasons to optimize heat retention. Some accounts suggest that these adaptations were shared informally among neighbors or passed down within families, reflecting a culture of practical problem-solving. You probably won't survive the most extreme nights without recognizing how cumulative small innovations can transform comfort and endurance. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often combined these heating techniques with careful attention to ventilation. Evidence points to a deliberate balance between retaining heat and ensuring smoke did not accumulate excessively. Diaries recount that slight adjustments in chimney positioning, flue, openings or hearth arrangement could drastically affect indoor air quality and temperature. You probably won't notice the subtle interplay at first, but its impact on comfort and survival is profound. Finally, you settle back near the hearth, feeling the cabin embrace you with warmth, amplified by human ingenuity. Anecdotal reports describe nights where families relied on these small, thoughtful innovations to endure prolonged storms and bitter cold. Frontier experience shows that mastering the interplay of fire, reflective surfaces and radiant objects was crucial for long-term survival. Records indicate that these practices, though simple, represent a sophisticated understanding of heat dynamics and resourcefulness. You probably won't survive the harshest winter nights without such measures, yet here, surrounded by log stones and firelight warmth, flows steadily, a testament to human adaptability and quiet persistence. You sit quietly, listening to the wind whipping against the cabin walls and notice how every creak and groan of timber seems amplified in the cold night. Observations from the period reveal that settlers developed a keen awareness of these sounds, interpreting shifts in the wind or snow pressure as signals for adjusting their indoor environment. Diaries recount that families often paused to listen, sometimes repositioning blankets, furs or furniture in response to subtle changes. You probably won't realize how crucial these auditory cues were until you notice how even minor sounds could influence comfort and survival. Records indicate that settlers paid close attention to the rhythm of snow falling and ice cracking, using these cues to predict shifts in temperature or the intensity of storms. Some accounts suggest that listening carefully allowed families to anticipate wind direction changes which could create drafts or cold pockets inside the cabin. Frontier experience shows that this attentiveness extended to monitoring animal activity outside, as the rustle of wildlife often indicated changing weather conditions. You probably won't notice how these external sounds guided daily adjustments until you sense the rhythm of the night in relation to your own movements. Anecdotal reports describe settlers tuning into the subtle changes in the cabin itself. Diaries recount the soft expansion of logs, the slight shifting of floorboards, and the whisper of frost creeping along cracks, all interpreted as indicators of temperature change. Evidence points to the fact that these sensory observations allowed families to preemptively add insulation, adjust clothing, or stoke the fire. You probably won't appreciate how this awareness became second nature until you feel the cabin subtly responding to your actions and environmental changes. Some accounts suggest that settlers even developed informal listening schedules, checking the cabin at regular intervals to detect structural strain ice buildup or shifting snow loads. Observations from the period reveal that such routines were particularly common during long blizzards or periods of extreme cold. Diaries recount that these practices allowed families to prevent damage and maintain a stable indoor temperature with minimal fuel use. Frontier experience shows that this methodical engagement with the environment was a key component of survival, blending observation, timing, and action. You notice the gentle interplay of firecrackle and cabin sounds. Records indicate that settlers used these internal auditory cues to monitor the effectiveness of heating arrangements, such as whether embers needed repositioning or if drafts were penetrating certain areas. Some accounts suggest that listening to the fire's rhythm became a form of intuitive knowledge, a subtle guide to managing heat throughout the night. Diaries recount families adjusting logs, embers and coals in response to these cues, maintaining consistent warmth with practiced precision. Observations from the period reveal that night sounds also had a psychological effect. Anecdotal reports describe the calming influence of familiar creaks, crackles, and the muffled patter of snow, providing a sense of continuity and security. Frontier experience shows that recognizing these sounds as predictable rather than threatening helped settlers rest more deeply, conserving energy while remaining subtly alert. You probably won't notice how much comfort these environmental cues provide until your mind syncs with the rhythm of the cabin and the night. Some accounts suggest that families occasionally taught children to interpret these sounds, turning survival awareness into a learned skill. Diaries recount the practice of pointing out subtle differences in wind gusts or the resonance of snow-laden roof timbers. Evidence points to the dual purpose of these lessons: practical survival and building confidence in navigating the harsh environment. You probably won't appreciate how foundational this knowledge was until you imagine the quiet vigilance passed down across generations. Records indicate that settlers sometimes used auditory observations to regulate fire management. Observations from the period reveal that the subtle hiss of embers, crackle of logs, or pop of pine knots signaled when to add fuel, when to adjust placement, or when to bank heat for the night. Some accounts suggest that families relied on these cues rather than relying solely on visual inspection, especially during dimly lit evenings. Frontier experience shows that acute listening skills complemented other survival strategies, forming a holistic approach to indoor warmth and safety. Anecdotal reports describe the use of subtle nighttime cues in conjunction with bedding adjustments. Diaries recount that slight movements in blankets, shifts in sleepers' positions, or the sound of clothing rubbing could indicate the need to redistribute warmth or reinforce insulation. Evidence points to the fact that settlers integrated these sensory observations seamlessly with fire management clothing and spatial arrangements, ensuring maximal thermal efficiency. You probably won't notice how integrated this system is until you feel the cabin respond in real time to your minor adjustments. Finally, you settle back against a warm quilt, letting your senses attune to the cabin's quiet symphony. Observations from the period reveal that the combination of environmental listening's subtle adjustments and shared awareness allowed families to endure some of the harshest nights imaginable. Diaries recount a sense of security and confidence derived from this attuned vigilance, a balance of observation, intuition, and action. You probably won't survive the coldest, longest nights without such attentiveness, yet here listening to the whispers of wind, wood, and snow. The cabin itself seems to breathe alongside you, a protective, enduring presence. You notice the dim glow of candles and lanterns flickering against the cabin walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to dance with the firelight. Records indicate that settlers carefully managed their light sources, understanding that illumination and warmth were subtly connected. Diaries recount that candles were placed strategically near beds or work areas, both to provide visibility and to radiate gentle heat that supplemented the hearth. You probably won't realize how much thought went into this until you notice how even a single flame can influence the perception of warmth and comfort across a room. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often used minimal lighting to preserve fuel while maintaining just enough visibility for nighttime chores or reading. Some accounts suggest that reflective surfaces like polished metal plates or mirrors were positioned to extend light and indirect warmth throughout the cabin. Frontier experience shows that these methods increase the effectiveness of small flames without adding significant fire risk. You probably won't appreciate the subtle balance between illumination and heat until you feel how light diffuses through the room, softening shadows and warming corners. Anecdotal reports describe families coordinating candle use with fire management, lighting wicks as embers flared to maximize efficiency. Diaries recount that certain routines, such as lighting a candle before tending the hearth or stoking embers, became habitual, creating a rhythm that supported both comfort and safety. Evidence points to the dual purpose of this practice: practical visibility and a gentle increase in ambient temperature. You probably won't notice the psychological reassurance provided by steady, soft light until you observe the calming effect it has on both body and mind. Some accounts suggest that settlers preferred tallow or beeswax candles, believing they burned longer and radiated more heat than other materials. Records indicate that wick length and placement were adjusted carefully to optimize both luminosity and warmth. Observations from the period reveal that families often rotated candle positions during the night to compensate for shifting shadows or localized cold spots. Frontier experience shows that these small adjustments repeated consistently contributed meaningfully to overall comfort. You probably won't survive the harshest nights without such attention to detail, yet here the subtle flicker of flame blends seamlessly with the warmth of the hearth. Diaries recount that lanterns filled with oil were sometimes used to extend light further across the cabin, particularly for evening chores or meal preparation. Some accounts suggest that settlers positioned lanterns near reflective surfaces or partially enclosed them to direct heat towards sleeping areas. Evidence points to the practical ingenuity behind this approach, balancing illumination, fire safety, and thermal comfort. You probably won't appreciate the intricacy until you notice how the interplay of light and warmth creates zones of comfort within the otherwise cold, shadowed cabin. Observations from the period reveal that lighting also played a psychological role, fostering a sense of security and well-being. Anecdotal reports describe families using the soft glow of candles and lanterns to create calming environments, reducing anxiety during the long, dark nights. Frontier experience shows that light, much like fire or clothing, was a tool for survival, influencing mood perception and even body temperature regulation. You probably won't notice this effect consciously, but it subtly reinforces endurance throughout the night. Some accounts suggest that settlers coordinated candle and lantern use with household routines, such as reading, mending clothing, or storytelling. Diaries recount that these evening rituals allowed families to remain productive while conserving energy and heat. Records indicate that light placement was often trialed and refined over seasons, creating an intuitive understanding of how illumination, warmth, and activity intersected. You probably won't survive efficiently without attention to such routines, yet here the cabin's gentle glow supports both function and comfort. Evidence points to the integration of light with other heat retention strategies. Observations from the period reveal that blankets, furs, and reflective hearth surfaces worked in tandem with candle and lantern placement to maintain steady temperatures. Some accounts suggest that subtle adjustments to lamp height or proximity could influence airflow and warmth distribution. Frontier experience shows that settlers learn to combine these methods intuitively, a holistic approach to survival. You probably won't notice the precision at first, but as warmth spreads through the flickering glow, the coordination becomes clear. Anecdotal reports describe children being lulled to sleep by the rhythmic flicker of candlelight, a gentle reinforcement of warmth and security. Diaries recount that the psychological comfort of soft illumination was as important as any physical measure in enduring cold nights. Observations from the period reveal that light was carefully balanced to avoid extinguishing flames while maximizing the sense of stability and safety. You probably won't appreciate this subtle effect until you observe how it interacts with the warmth of bedding, clothing, and hearth heat. Finally, you settle near a candlelit corner, allowing the combination of fire, ambient glow, and thoughtful arrangements to envelop you. Frontier experience shows that managing light was not merely a practical matter, but an art of comfort, contributing to restfulness, mental resilience, and thermal perception. Records indicate that families who mastered the interplay of light and heat experienced more peaceful, restorative nights. Diaries recount the quiet satisfaction of a cabin fully alive with warmth and soft illumination, creating an enduring sense of safety amid the relentless cold outside. You probably won't survive without such integrated strategies, yet here, immersed in gentle firelight and flickering candle glow, the cabin feels like a sanctuary, a delicate balance of warmth, light, and human ingenuity. You shift closer to the stacked firewood, noting how the neat piles seem to hum with potential energy. Frontier experience shows that sourcing and storing wood properly was critical for nighttime survival. Diaries recount that families often split logs, dried them in sunlit areas, and arranged them inside the cabin so they were easily accessible during the night. You probably won't realize how much foresight this required until you feel the satisfaction of reaching for dry, ready fuel without stepping into the cold, risking exposure to wind or snow. Records indicate that settlers frequently sorted wood by size and dryness, with smaller twigs reserved for quick kindling and larger logs for long-lasting embers. Observations from the period reveal that careful selection influenced not only the intensity of the fire, but also how evenly heat radiated throughout the cabin. Some accounts suggest that poorly seasoned wood could create more smoke, diminishing both warmth and air quality. You probably won't notice the subtle difference until you feel the steady, even heat of well-prepared fuel compared with the inconsistent warmth from damp logs. Anecdotal reports describe families stacking wood in crosshatch or interlace patterns, a technique that allowed air circulation for gradual drying while maximizing storage efficiency. Diaries recount that this method prevented mold or moisture accumulation, ensuring fuel remained viable through prolonged cold spells. Frontier experience shows that these small structural details could determine whether the cabin stayed comfortable or became bitterly cold during extended winter nights. You probably won't appreciate the ingenuity until you notice how the placement affects both accessibility and heat potential. Some accounts suggest that settlers brought in wood, gradually avoiding large indoor piles that could smother heat or block living space. Observations from the period reveal that fuel management was a delicate balance between supply safety and efficiency. Diaries recount that families often prepared supplemental small bundles near sleeping areas, providing a quick source of warmth without disrupting the main fire. Evidence points to the fact that careful distribution minimized trips outdoors in extreme weather a practical adaptation to harsh environments. Records indicate that settlers sometimes kept a small reserve of hardwood near the hearth for late-night stoking. Frontier experience shows that this practice allowed them to maintain steady embers, while avoiding the disruptive need to fetch more wood midnight. Some accounts suggest that these reserves were replenished during the day, with an awareness of anticipated nighttime temperatures. You probably won't realize the subtle advantage of this until you feel how consistent heat contributes to longer, more restful sleep. Anecdotal reports describe the sensory experience of handling firewood, the faint scent of pine or oak, the texture of rough bark, and the satisfying weight of a logs ready to fuel the hearth. Diaries recount that these sensory cues became cues for readiness, guiding settlers in arranging fuel quickly and effectively. Observations from the period reveal that such tactile knowledge was vital, a combination of instinct and practical experience ensuring survival. You probably won't notice how deeply ingrained these small rituals became until you move through the motions yourself. Some accounts suggest that stacking wood near walls or windows served an additional purpose as insulation. Records indicate that strategically placed logs acted as buffers, reducing drafts and reinforcing the cabin's thermal envelope. Frontier experience shows that these subtle structural strategies amplified the effectiveness of clothing bedding and fire-enhancing overall comfort. You probably won't recognize this synergy until you sense the combined effect of walls, wood, and heat flowing through the cabin. Evidence points to settlers organizing wood by type, with resinous softwoods for quick sparks and harder, denser woods for long-lasting warmth. Diaries recount that families quickly learned which combinations produced the most efficient fires, adjusting stacking patterns accordingly. Observations from the period reveal a continuous cycle of experimentation, adaptation, and refinement. You probably won't survive as comfortably without attention to these details, yet here the stacked wood feels like a silent partner in the cabin's warmth strategy. Anecdotal reports describe creative storage solutions such as stacking wood under benches along loft edges or near the hearth in compact piles. Some accounts suggest that even partially covered piles retained dryness, better protecting fuel from residual moisture indoors. Frontier experience shows that this dual-purpose strategy, storage and insulation, was an intuitive aspect of survival, developed through repeated observation of fire behavior and environmental conditions. Diaries recount families adjusting these arrangements, seasonally maximizing both space and thermal benefit. Finally, you step back from the neatly stacked logs and feel the reassurance of preparedness. Observations from the period reveal that careful sourcing, drying, and storage of firewood formed a cornerstone of winter survival. Records indicate that families who mastered these strategies enjoyed steadier heat, fewer interruptions, and greater safety from exposure. You probably won't appreciate the full impact until you feel the warmth radiating from a well-fed fire supported by thoughtful preparation and human ingenuity. Here, the combination of wood fire and attentive planning creates a quiet rhythm of endurance that carries you through the night. You notice a small animal stirring quietly near the hearth, its breath mingling with the warmth that radiates through the cabin. Frontier experience shows that pets were more than companions. Their body heat often contributed to the collective warmth of the household. Diaries recount that dogs or cats frequently curled alongside children or adults, creating localized pockets of heat. You probably won't realize the subtle advantage of this until you feel the gentle warmth extending from a small sleeping creature into your own space, an intimate and quiet layer of survival. Some accounts suggest that animals were sometimes used strategically positioned near doorways or windows to block drafts, while simultaneously adding warmth to the interior. Records indicate that settlers observed animal behavior learning where pets tended to rest and integrating that into their heat management routines. Observations from the period reveal that pets were particularly effective when combined with blankets or quilts, reinforcing the cabin's thermal envelope. You probably won't appreciate the practical ingenuity of this until you sense the difference between a room with movement and warmth, concentrated, and one left static. Anecdotal reports describe children being encouraged to snuggle with animals during particularly frigid nights. Diaries recount that this practice had multiple benefits. It preserved body heat, offered emotional reassurance, and kept restless children calm. Evidence points to the fact that settlers understood the synergistic value of human and animal warmth, integrating it naturally into daily routines. You probably won't notice the subtle efficiency until you feel the cabin's energy shared among all its occupants, human and animal alike. Observations from the period reveal that pets sometimes acted as early warning systems, alerting settlers to external threats, such as approaching wildlife or shifting snowdrifts. Some accounts suggest that their movement or vocalizations provided cues for adjusting blankets, checking the fire, or preparing for sudden temperature drops. Records indicate that these small indicators were incorporated into nightly vigilance, reinforcing both safety and warmth. You probably won't appreciate how integrated these practices were until you imagine the quiet cooperation between humans and animals throughout the night. Settlers often practice layering animals in combination with bedding. Diaries recount that small dogs or cats would be tucked beneath quilts, providing warmth directly where it was most needed. Some accounts suggest that even barnyard animals occasionally contributed if housed nearby, radiating gentle heat into adjoining cabins or lofts. Frontier experience shows that this passive contribution to thermal management was a low-effort, high-reward adaptation. You probably won't realize the subtle influence until you feel the gentle radiance of shared warmth. Evidence points to the observation that animals' body temperatures were relatively high, providing effective microclimates. Some accounts suggest that settlers timed feeding and care routines to ensure animals were comfortable and rested, indirectly benefiting human warmth. Diaries recount that attentive care enhanced both the animals' comfort and their thermal contribution, demonstrating a reciprocal relationship. You probably won't notice the efficiency of this arrangement until you sense the balance of heat flowing between all living beings in the cabin. Some sources claim that settlers learned to anticipate animal habits to maximize heat retention. Observations from the period reveal that pets often sought the warmest spots near the hearth, creating natural convection pathways for heat. Diaries recount families observing these behaviors over years, adjusting bedding and sleeping arrangements accordingly. Frontier experience shows that this understanding allowed settlers to use natural behaviors to their advantage, a subtle but effective survival tactic. You probably won't fully appreciate the coordination until you feel the warmth extending from every corner of the cabin. Anecdotal reports describe small rituals involving pets, such as encouraging them to stay close at night, or layering furs on top of them for added insulation. Some accounts suggest that settlers even used animals as a living barrier to prevent drafts from reaching sleeping areas. Evidence points to the fact that these strategies were often improvised, responding to immediate environmental conditions and household needs. You probably won't notice the ingenuity at first, but the effect on comfort and endurance is tangible. Records indicate that children and adults alike benefited from the shared heat of animals. Diaries recount that huddling against a dog or cat reduced shivering and allowed the core body temperature to stabilize more effectively. Observations from the period reveal that settlers recognized and encouraged these behaviors, integrating them into daily and nightly routines. Frontier experience shows that warmth in a cabin was cumulative, built from fire textiles, human bodies, and the small radiance of animals. You probably won't survive as comfortably without considering this living heat-sharing network. Finally, you settle back into your bedding, feeling the gentle pulse of heat radiating from a small resting animal nearby. Some accounts suggest that families who mastered this form of communal warmth enjoyed not only physical comfort, but also a psychological sense of safety and reassurance. Diaries recount that observing and adapting to the natural behaviors of animals was as important as fire management or bedding arrangement. You probably won't appreciate the full contribution of pets until you feel their warmth subtly supporting your own, a quiet but essential part of enduring the coldest frontier nights. You notice the subtle tension of winter illnesses pressing on the mind, a quiet awareness that cold nights could quickly lead to sickness if precautions weren't taken. Frontier experience shows that settlers were constantly vigilant against colds, flu, and other ailments that could sap body heat or disrupt sleep. Diaries recount that families implemented small preventative measures, from ensuring clothing remained dry to managing fire intensity and ventilation. You probably won't realize how interconnected health and warmth were until you feel the combined effect of careful preparation on your own body. Records indicate that settlers paid close attention to hydration even in freezing conditions. Some accounts suggest that sipping warm teas, broths, or lightly sweetened water helped maintain internal warmth while supporting overall health. Observations from the period reveal that small quantities of hot liquids could improve circulation and reduce the likelihood of respiratory issues during prolonged exposure to cold. You probably won't notice the subtle benefit until you feel how a simple drink contributes to thermal comfort and well-being. Anecdotal reports describe families layering blankets and furs to create dry, insulated sleeping environments that minimized exposure to cold and dampness, a crucial factor in preventing winter illnesses. Diaries recount that settlers recognized moisture as a primary threat, often rotating bedding or moving sleeping arrangements to maintain dryness. Evidence points to the careful balance between insulation and ventilation, a nuanced understanding honed through repeated observation. You probably won't fully appreciate this balance until you sense how moisture management and layering work together to preserve health and warmth. Some accounts suggest that nutritional strategy also played a role in illness prevention. Frontier experience shows that high-calorie meals rich in protein and fat were consumed to maintain energy and metabolic heat, reducing vulnerability to hypothermia and weakening conditions. Diaries recount that families carefully timed evening meals to coincide with peak fire warmth, enhancing the thermal benefit of digestion. Observations from the period reveal that food, sleep, and environmental control were integrated into a comprehensive strategy for health and survival. You probably won't notice the full importance until your own metabolism responds to warmth and sustenance together. Records indicate that settlers sometimes incorporated medicinal herbs into daily routines, both for respiratory support and general immunity. Some accounts suggest that pine needles, sage, and rosemary were burned near the hearth or steeped in hot water, creating both aroma and therapeutic effect. Diaries recount subtle rituals of preparing these herbs before bed, believing that inhalation or topical application could stave off colds. Frontier experience shows that these small habits complemented fire clothing and bedding, forming a multi-layered approach to health. You probably won't realize the psychological as well as physical reassurance provided until you sense the calming influence throughout the cabin. Observations from the period reveal that maintaining personal warmth was tightly linked to illness prevention. Anecdotal reports describe settlers emphasizing fully layered clothing, heated bedding, and the careful positioning of bodies to preserve extremity temperature. Diaries recount that even minor exposure like hands brushing cold walls or feet touching the floor could lead to discomfort or illness. Evidence points to the fact that settlers approached temperature management with both immediate comfort and long-term health in mind. You probably won't appreciate the interconnection until you notice how consistently warmth supports resilience. Some accounts suggest that indoor hygiene played a role in reducing winter illness. Frontier experience shows that washing hands, wiping surfaces, and managing waste were performed thoughtfully even in the coldest nights to minimize exposure to pathogens. Diaries recount that these practices, though simple, helped maintain family health and reduced the frequency of ailments that could compromise warmth and energy. Observations from the period reveal a careful interplay between cleanliness insulation and fire management. You probably won't survive as effectively without attending to these details. Evidence points to the use of small rituals such as massaging hands and feet to improve circulation and reduce the risk of frostbite or stiffness. Some accounts suggest that settlers encouraged children to participate in these routines, integrating warmth preservation with physical care. Diaries recount that these moments of attention often before sleep reinforce both comfort and long-term health. Frontier experience shows that subtle physical care complemented fire clothing and bedding strategies, creating a comprehensive survival system. You probably won't notice the full effect until you feel the warmth spreading through attentive movement. Anecdotal reports describe the careful monitoring of temperature within sleeping areas, adjusting fire intensity blanket layers and clothing to prevent both overheating and chilling. Diaries recount that families developed an intuitive understanding of the cabin's thermal dynamics responding to changes in temperature and activity. Observations from the period reveal that illness prevention was as much about vigilance and responsiveness as it was about materials. You probably won't appreciate the sophistication of this approach until you experience how coordinated adjustments preserve comfort and health simultaneously. Finally, you settle back into your bedding, feeling the synergy of fire clothing, bedding, nutrition, and attentive care. Frontier experience shows that the combination of warmth management and proactive health measures allowed settlers to endure extended freezing nights with minimal illness. Diaries recount a sense of quiet assurance that comes from knowing every precaution has been taken. You probably won't survive as comfortably without these integrated practices, yet here, surrounded by layers of warmth, nourishment, and vigilance, the cabin becomes a sanctuary against both cold and disease, a harmonious environment where survival and comfort coexist. You notice how the cabin seems to breathe with a rhythm of its own, the subtle creaks of timber blending with the crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of bedding. Observations from the period reveal that settlers attuned themselves to these sounds, understanding them as cues for indoor temperature, draft movement, and structural stress. Diaries recount that families would adjust blankets, furniture, and fire placement in response to the cabin's nocturnal symphony. You probably won't realize how critical this awareness was until you notice how small changes in sound coincide with shifts in warmth and comfort. Records indicate that the creaking of logs often signaled expansion or contraction due to temperature fluctuations. Some accounts suggest that attentive settlers could detect impending drafts or weak points in walls and roofs by listening closely. Frontier experience shows that this auditory awareness allowed families to make minor adjustments before discomfort escalated, a subtle but vital survival skill. You probably won't appreciate the precision required until you sense how each sound guides action in maintaining warmth and stability. Anecdotal reports describe settlers responding to external noises such as wind rattling against shutters or snow shifting on the roof by repositioning blankets or stoking the fire. Diaries recount that even the distant howl of wolves or rustle of wildlife was noted as a potential sign to double-check insulation or heat sources. Evidence points to the fact that these auditory cues were integrated into the household strategy, ensuring both comfort and safety. You probably won't notice the subtle choreography until you feel the cabin responding dynamically to environmental cues. Observations from the period reveal that sleep itself was attuned to sound. Some accounts suggest that settlers developed an intuitive sense of when to wake for minor adjustments, such as adding kindling, rotating logs, or adjusting bedding. Diaries recount that this skill minimized unnecessary exposure to cold while maximizing comfort. Frontier experience shows that being able to interpret sound without fully waking was a quiet but essential adaptation to long freezing nights. You probably won't realize the full value of this until you imagine moving seamlessly with the cabin's nocturnal signals. Some accounts suggest that the combination of fire huddling and careful listening created a self-regulating environment. Records indicate that families could predict temperature drops, shifts in drafts, and the duration of embers by attuning to sound and subtle environmental changes. Anecdotal reports describe the way quiet observation allowed settlers to optimize their warmth without constant intervention. You probably won't notice the skill involved until you sense the coordination between body hearth and cabin. Evidence points to the fact that families taught children to recognize these cues, blending survival knowledge with experiential learning. Diaries recount simple instructions such as noticing the pop of sap, the hiss of frost, or the change in wind gusts as signals to adjust bedding or clothing. Frontier experience shows that this knowledge passed down orally was critical for maintaining collective warmth and safety. You probably won't appreciate the subtle education until you imagine the shared attentiveness across generations within the cabin walls. Observations from the period reveal that auditory cues also guided fire management. Some accounts suggest that settlers listened for changes in crackle noting, whether logs were drying, burning too quickly, or producing excess smoke. Diaries recount adjusting logs, accordingly a quiet orchestration that preserved heat while minimizing fire hazards. Frontier experience shows that listening was not passive. It was an active component of survival strategy, integrated seamlessly with other routines. You probably won't notice the depth of coordination until you experience how the cabin responds to subtle interventions. Anecdotal reports describe settlers using sound to monitor sleeping areas, noting rustles, sighs, or shifts that indicated discomfort or exposure. Records indicate that these observations prompted small adjustments, ensuring that children, elders, and pets maintained core warmth throughout the night. Diaries recount that the careful balance of fire blankets and huddling was guided in part by attentive listening. Frontier experience shows that this practice reduced cold-related stress and improved sleep quality. You probably won't realize the sophistication until you feel the subtle network of warmth responding around you. Some accounts suggest that nighttime silence itself became a tool. Observations from the period reveal that families minimized unnecessary movement, conversation, or clanging of objects, allowing heat to settle and embers to burn steadily. Diaries recount that the quiet environment enhanced the perception of warmth and comfort, creating a controlled microclimate within the cabin. Evidence points to the integration of behavior, attention, and sound as a vital aspect of frontier survival. You probably won't notice how effective this is until the room feels perfectly balanced, responsive, and alive. Finally, you settle back against the quilts, letting your senses attune to the gentle symphony of the cabin. Diaries recount that sleep was enhanced by this harmony of sound, warmth, and presence, reducing anxiety and promoting endurance. Frontier experience shows that settlers mastered a rhythm of observation, listening, and adjustment that created a resilient, comfortable environment. You probably won't survive the harshest nights as efficiently without this awareness, yet here immersed in firelight and the hushed orchestra of creaks and crackles, the cabin seems alive, harmonizing with your body and movements, guiding you toward restful, sustained warmth. You settle deeper into your blankets, letting the room's quiet fill your senses, and notice how boredom itself can become a subtle challenge during long winter nights. Diaries recount that settlers developed creative ways to occupy their minds, from storytelling and singing to small handcrafts that required attention but minimal movement. Frontier experience shows that mental engagement was as important as physical warmth, preventing restlessness that could compromise both sleep and body heat. You probably won't realize the subtle effect until you sense how occupying the mind helps your body relax and maintain internal warmth. Some accounts suggest that children and adults alike participated in counting games rhymes or simple math exercises to pass the time and reinforce memory skills. Records indicate that these practices served dual purposes: entertainment and cognitive engagement, reducing the perception of the long cold night. Observations from the period reveal that such activities often took place near the fire, providing both illumination and comfort. You probably won't notice the calming effect until you experience the rhythmic focus of simple tasks against the backdrop of winter stillness. Anecdotal reports describe storytelling as a critical nightly ritual. Diaries recount tales of local legends, personal adventures, or humorous anecdotes shared quietly to prevent disturbing others while fostering a sense of togetherness. Evidence points to the psychological benefit of these narratives, reducing anxiety and reinforcing social bonds. Frontier experience shows that the combination of warmth, companionship, and storytelling created a subtle, reinforcing cycle of comfort and endurance. You probably won't appreciate this fully until you notice how stories lighten the mental load of long nights. Some accounts suggest that settlers also engaged in quiet crafts such as mending, clothing weaving, or carving small wooden objects. Records indicate that these activities provided both practical outcomes and a soothing rhythm for the hands which could otherwise grow stiff and cold. Observations from the period reveal that the repetitive motion and tactile engagement promoted circulation, complementing the thermal strategies of layered bedding and clothing. You probably won't notice the benefit until you feel warmth subtly increasing in the extremities. Evidence points to the role of ambient noise and subtle movement in mental engagement. Diaries recount that the crackle of the fire, the shifting of blankets, and the low murmur of companions became part of a meditative background, allowing settlers to focus on repetitive tasks or storytelling without distraction. Frontier experience shows that such integration of sensory input and activity supported both psychological resilience and physical endurance. You probably won't realize the interplay until you feel your mind settling into a gentle, steady rhythm. Some accounts suggest that whimsical games like observing shapes in smoke or counting snowflakes through frosted windows were used to maintain curiosity and focus. Observations from the period reveal that these activities provided entertainment, while minimizing movement and exposure to cold. Diaries recount that these small diversions helped children stay calm and warm, while adults managed hearths and other survival tasks. You probably won't notice how effective these strategies are until you experience the combined effect of mental engagement and physical comfort. Anecdotal reports describe families improvising instruments, or using simple objects to create music, tapping rhythms on tables, or humming songs softly. Evidence points to the emotional and physiological benefits, promoting relaxation and a sense of cohesion within the cabin. Frontier experience shows that these activities supported both morale and endurance, subtly enhancing warmth retention by encouraging gentle movement and interaction. You probably won't appreciate the hidden synergy until you feel how laughter and rhythm radiate through a cold, quiet room. Records indicate that settlers carefully balanced activities with periods of rest, ensuring that mental engagement did not overstimulate or deplete energy needed for sleep. Diaries recount that structured routines, alternating storytelling crafts and quiet reflection, were developed through experience to optimize both body and mind. Observations from the period reveal that maintaining this balance was crucial, particularly in harsh weather when leaving the cabin was impossible. You probably won't notice the effectiveness until you feel a sense of calm and readiness for rest as night deepens. Some accounts suggest that whimsical or imaginative exercises like creating small games from scraps of paper or weaving simple patterns into cloth serve to distract from the biting cold outside. Diaries recount that these diversions allowed settlers to maintain morale and prevent restlessness from sapping body heat. Frontier experience shows that engagement of the mind indirectly supported thermal comfort by keeping the body active in small, controlled ways. You probably won't appreciate the subtle integration until you feel your focus shift from the cold outside to the cozy occupied interior. Finally, you settle back against the warm bedding, letting the hum of activity, stories and soft movement envelop you. Evidence points to the fact that mental engagement, when paired with physical warmth and attentive routines, created a holistic survival strategy. Diaries recount the quiet satisfaction of evenings where mind and body were harmonized against the cold, subtle yet powerful combination that reinforced endurance and comfort. You probably won't survive the long frigid nights as effectively without engaging your mind yet. Here, immersed in warmth, sound, and quiet purpose, the cabin feels alive with gentle energy, supporting both thought and body. You notice the soft scent of dried herbs and wood smoke drifting through the cabin, creating a subtle layer of comfort that settles over the room. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often used aromatic plants such as sage, rosemary, and pine boughs, both to add fragrance and to slightly purify the air. Diaries recount that these scents were soothing, signaling a familiar environment and providing psychological warmth in addition to physical insulation. You probably won't realize the subtle impact until you breathe deeply, feeling how the aromas mingle with the sensation of layered blankets and fire heat. Some accounts suggest that certain herbs are also used for practical purposes such as deterring insects or mildly disinfecting surfaces. Frontier experience shows that families often hung bundles from rafters or placed them near sleeping areas to maximize benefit. Records indicate that the combination of fire and aromatic plants enhanced the cabin's overall atmosphere, making it more inviting despite the freezing temperatures outside. You probably won't notice the full effect until you sense the calm and reassurance that accompanies familiar smells. Anecdotal reports describe settlers crushing leaves or twigs to release additional fragrance, sometimes incorporating them into bedding or clothing. Diaries recount that these small touches contributed both to sensory comfort and to a feeling of cleanliness, reducing anxiety during long isolated nights. Observations from the period reveal that attention to scent was part of a holistic approach to cabin life, integrating aroma with fire insulation and daily routines. You probably won't appreciate how deeply these subtle details affect comfort until you sense the combined effect on body and mind. Some accounts suggest that smoke from the hearth itself carried aromatic qualities, particularly when certain woods like pine or cedar were burned. Records indicate that families recognized this dual-purpose heat and gentle fragrance combined to enhance comfort. Frontier experience shows that the selection of firewood influenced both physical warmth and the sensory environment, a practical integration of survival and atmosphere. You probably won't notice the subtle interplay until you inhale and feel both calm and warmth spreading through the cabin. Evidence points to settlers arranging plants and herbs near sleeping areas, often layering them beneath or around blankets. Diaries recount that this placement allowed fragrances to rise slowly throughout the night, creating a consistent sensory presence. Observations from the period reveal that this practice subtly reinforced routines, helping sleepers feel secure and familiar with their environment. You probably won't survive as comfortably without such attention to sensory detail, yet here the scents blend seamlessly with warmth. Anecdotal reports describe the use of aromatic herbs in cooking, further enhancing the cabin's environment. Some accounts suggest that even the smell of simmering broths or dried meats infused with herbs contributed to both appetite and comfort. Records indicate that settlers were keenly aware of these effects, arranging hearth activities to maximize combined sensory and thermal benefit. Frontier experience shows that the olfactory environment was a quiet, often overlooked component of endurance. You probably won't appreciate it fully until the cabin smells of both warmth and familiar sustenance. Some accounts suggest that herbal bundles were rotated or refreshed over time to maintain potency. Diaries recount that families would replace old dried plants with fresh ones whenever possible, ensuring a consistent sensory presence. Observations from the period reveal that settlers understood the importance of maintaining a stable, comforting environment through scent alongside fire bedding and clothing. You probably won't notice the subtle strategy until you feel the calm consistency that comes from careful attention. Evidence points to the use of herbs as a form of ritual marking the end of daytime activity and signalling the onset of sleep. Diaries recount that gathering, hanging, or arranging plants was often performed quietly before bed, reinforcing routine and psychological readiness. Frontier experience shows that these practices provided mental comfort, reducing stress and enhancing endurance. You probably won't appreciate the influence until you feel the combination of scent, warmth, and habit easing your body and mind into rest. Observations from the period reveal that even subtle fragrance differences between fresh and dried plants were recognized and appreciated. Some accounts suggest that families preferred certain herbs for their calming properties, associating scent with security and comfort. Diaries recount the careful selection and placement of practice that combined intuition, experience, and survival strategy. You probably won't survive as comfortably without attention to these small sensory details, yet here the aroma gently enhances the cabin's warmth and safety. Finally, you settle back into the soft layered bedding, letting the combination of warmth, firelight, and subtle scents envelop you. Anecdotal reports describe the profound effect of a thoughtfully arranged cabin environment, where sensory cues reinforce comfort and endurance. Observations from the period reveal that aroma was an integral, though quiet, part of survival strategy. You probably won't notice the full benefit until you close your eyes and feel the cabin embrace you completely, a sanctuary of warmth, fragrance, and human ingenuity against the relentless cold outside. You shift slightly on the bedding, feeling the reassuring weight of multiple quilts and furs layered beneath and above you. Observations from the period reveal that settlers meticulously arranged blankets, quilts, and animal hides to maximize warmth while preventing cold spots. Diaries recount that families often rotated bedding according to nightly temperature changes, moving heavier layers closer to sleepers in need and adjusting lighter ones for those already warm. You probably won't realize how critical this was until you feel the subtle balance of heat enveloping every part of your body. Some accounts suggest that layering was not just about thickness, but also about texture and material. Records indicate that softer fabrics were placed next to skin for comfort, while coarser or heavier textiles formed the outer barrier against drafts. Frontier experience shows that this combination created pockets of trapped air, enhancing insulation and maintaining stable body temperature throughout the night. You probably won't notice the sophistication of this arrangement until you feel how each layer contributes to a continuous gentle warmth. Anecdotal reports describe the strategic use of quilts or furs to create individual microclimates. Diaries recount that children or the elderly were sometimes enveloped in additional blankets, ensuring that their core temperatures remained steady even when the cabin cooled. Observations from the period reveal that such personal attention was a vital component of survival, particularly in extreme weather conditions. You probably won't appreciate the subtle precision until you sense the differential warmth across sleeping areas. Some accounts suggest that settlers alternated the position of furs and quilts to extend their longevity and preserve insulation properties. Records indicate that frequently flipping or rearranging layers prevented compaction, maintained loft, and ensured maximum efficiency. Frontier experience shows that attention to these details was often learned through trial and observation over multiple winters. You probably won't notice the effect until you feel the consistent, reliable comfort they provide. Evidence points to the use of supplementary padding beneath sleeping areas. Diaries recount that straw-dried grasses or folded clothing were placed under mattresses or directly on the floor to reduce heat loss. Observations from the period reveal that this additional layer buffered against cold air rising from the wooden floor, creating a more stable sleeping environment. You probably won't realize the significance until you sense the insulating effect beneath your body as you settle. Anecdotal reports describe careful folding and tucking of quilts around sleeping limbs to prevent heat from escaping. Some accounts suggest that edges were pinned or tucked beneath mattresses or tucked between bodies to form continuous insulation. Frontier experience shows that these practices became habitual, often unnoticed by adults but observed and imitated by children learning survival strategies. You probably won't appreciate the sophistication until you feel the cocoon-like embrace of carefully arranged layers. Records indicate that settlers sometimes combined blankets with heated stones or small containers of embers placed safely near the sleeping area. Observations from the period reveal that this generated gentle localized warmth, particularly for feet and hands. Diaries recount that the practice required vigilance to avoid accidental burns or fire hazards, but the payoff was increased comfort through long, frigid nights. You probably won't notice the subtle benefit until the warmth slowly seeps into the extremities. Some accounts suggest that settlers used multiple textures to create layered sensory comfort. Frontier experience shows that soft furs against the skin, medium blankets for heat retention, and coarser outer layers for protection against drafts work together to form a finely tuned system. Diaries recount that families experimented with combinations of materials until the arrangement balanced warmth, comfort, and practicality. You probably won't appreciate the interplay until each layer seems to hold you gently yet securely. Observations from the period reveal that sleep positioning complemented bedding arrangement. Anecdotal reports describe curling tucking or alternating limb positions to maximize contact with insulating layers. Records indicate that families guided children in these techniques, teaching subtle adjustments to preserve heat without disturbing rest. Frontier experience shows that body positioning and bedding arrangement function together as a cohesive survival system. You probably won't notice the sophistication until you feel warmth maintained even as you shift slightly and sleep. Finally, you lean back and feel the combined effect of multiple layers of quilts, furs, and supplemental bedding. Diaries recount that settlers relied on this careful orchestration to survive long, harsh nights. Observations from the period reveal that thoughtful layering, attention to material properties, and strategic arrangement created a microclimate capable of preserving warmth and promoting restful sleep. You probably won't survive the coldest nights as effectively without such methods, yet here the cabin embraces you in a cocoon of heat, comfort, and human ingenuity that carries you peacefully through the night. You settle back into your blankets, noticing the faint chill lingering near the corners of the cabin, and you realize that even the most carefully arranged fire bedding and clothing cannot fully conquer the cold without careful attention to personal movement. Diaries recount that settlers often practice subtle exercises before sleep, like gentle stretching or hand and foot movement to stimulate circulation and retain heat. Frontier experience shows that these small motions, repeated nightly, helped maintain core body temperature throughout long winter nights. You probably won't appreciate the full benefit until you feel warmth slowly spreading through limbs that had grown stiff from inactivity. Some accounts suggest that rhythmic breathing techniques were used intentionally, particularly when the cold penetrated deep into the cabin. Records indicate that inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly helped circulate warmth and maintain calm and almost meditative approach to enduring cold. Observations from the period reveal that these practices often accompanied other routines such as adjusting blankets or repositioning furs, creating a holistic system of physical and psychological resilience. You probably won't notice the subtle advantage until you feel the slow, steady pulse of warmth accompanying each breath. Anecdotal reports describe settlers rubbing their hands and feet together or against clothing to generate heat. Diaries recount that these small, deliberate actions could make a measurable difference in comfort, especially for children or the elderly who are more susceptible to the cold. Evidence points to the fact that tactile engagement with fabrics, furs, and skin itself was a core component of maintaining warmth. Frontier experience shows that even minor movements amplified the effectiveness of layered insulation. You probably won't realize the subtle interplay until the warmth from your fingertips spreads gently through your body. Some accounts suggest that settlers coordinated these movements with shared warmth strategies. Records indicate that huddling together in specific arrangements amplified heat retention, and small adjustments were made throughout the night to ensure even distribution. Observations from the period reveal that families developed intuitive understanding of how to share warmth effectively, learning through trial, observation, and experience. You probably won't appreciate how thoughtfully these interactions were orchestrated until you feel the gentle pressure of bodies transferring warmth. Evidence points to the integration of light physical activity with fire management. Diaries recount that tending the hearth, adjusting logs, or repositioning embers provided both necessary heat and gentle movement that prevented stiffness and loss of warmth. Some accounts suggest that these tasks were often done quietly to avoid disturbing sleeping children, while maintaining maximum efficiency. Frontier experience shows that the combination of activity awareness and coordination created a continuous, subtle system of warmth. You probably won't notice the sophistication until you observe how body movement, fire, and clothing interact seamlessly. Anecdotal reports describe settlers layering textiles around limbs before and after activity, allowing motion to generate heat while minimizing exposure. Records indicate that this combination helped preserve energy and reduce the likelihood of sudden cooling during movement. Observations from the period reveal that such practices were refined over time, with families learning which adjustments produced the best results. You probably won't survive as comfortably without integrating movement-layered fabrics and attention to circulation into your nightly routine. Some accounts suggest that mental engagement enhanced these physical strategies. Diaries recount that storytelling, quiet conversation, or imaginative games distracted from the chill and encouraged subtle movement. Frontier experience shows that mental stimulation indirectly supported warmth by preventing lethargy and promoting small instinctive adjustments. You probably won't notice the effect until you sense your body responding to both warmth and cognitive engagement simultaneously. Records indicate that settlers often synchronize breathing movement and fire management in a practiced rhythm. Observations from the period reveal that these integrated routines allowed for more efficient heat retention and prolonged comfort. Diaries recount families adjusting blankets, bedding, and clothing while maintaining calm and focus, creating a coordinated response to environmental conditions. Evidence points to the subtle efficiency of these habits, which balanced warmth, energy conservation, and preparedness. You probably won't fully appreciate it until your body experiences the synergy of these combined actions. Anecdotal reports describe evening rituals such as gently tapping blankets to redistribute insulation, or shifting furs to cover exposed limbs. Some accounts suggest that these minor adjustments were habitual, passed down as intuitive knowledge. Frontier experience shows that these seemingly small actions contributed significantly to comfort and endurance, preventing heat loss and maintaining stable microclimates within the cabin. Diaries recount that children quickly learn these habits, integrating survival techniques into daily life. You probably won't realize their cumulative effect until you feel the full embrace of warmth. Finally, you lean back, fully letting the combination of layered bedding, subtle movement, shared warmth, and attentive adjustments work together. Observations from the period reveal that these practices formed a quiet, continuous system of survival, blending physical, sensory, and psychological strategies. Records indicate that families who mastered these routines endured the harshest nights with greater comfort and resilience. You probably won't survive as comfortably without such integration. Yet here, enveloped in warmth, you feel the cabin respond to each motion, breath and adjustment, a living network of endurance and human ingenuity. You glance toward the small windows, noting how frost has formed delicate patterns across the glass, and realize that even the coldest nights have their own quiet beauty. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often admired such phenomena, taking note of ice formation, snowdrifts, and wind patterns as both aesthetic and practical cues. Diaries recount that children were sometimes encouraged to observe these patterns, learning to interpret weather and predict changes. You probably won't notice how these visual cues contributed to preparedness until you see how subtle differences in frost indicate shifts in temperature or wind. Some accounts suggest that settlers used window frost to anticipate cold drafts or the need for additional insulation. Records indicate that families adjusted quilts, blankets, or window coverings in response to frost patterns, a practice rooted in careful observation of natural indicators. Frontier experience shows that recognizing these visual cues became an intuitive skill passed down from parent to child. You probably won't appreciate the sophistication until you notice how a simple ice pattern guides practical adjustments for warmth. Anecdotal reports describe settlers placing reflective materials near windows to redirect firelight into the room, using both illumination and heat more effectively. Diaries recount that this enhanced comfort, creating warmer zones in sleeping areas and reducing the perception of cold. Observations from the period reveal that even minor interventions like positioning tin or polished metal plates could make a significant difference. You probably won't realize the subtle ingenuity until you feel warmth spreading more evenly across the cabin. Some accounts suggest that snow accumulation against the exterior of the cabin was intentionally monitored. Records indicate that families occasionally cleared snow near windows or doors to prevent cold infiltration or allowed light snow to act as natural insulation in other areas. Frontier experience shows that settlers observed the environment meticulously, using both natural and human-made adjustments to maintain indoor warmth. Diaries recount that these small routines became habitual, enhancing comfort and efficiency. You probably won't appreciate the subtle interplay until you sense how indoor warmth responds to outside conditions. Evidence points to the integration of natural light with warmth management. Some accounts suggest that settlers opened shutters slightly during daylight to allow sun rays to gently heat interior spaces, complementing fire-generated warmth. Observations from the period reveal that families timed these adjustments, carefully balancing light and heat without causing drafts. Diaries recount that this practice contributed to both comfort and psychological well-being during short winter days. You probably won't notice the effect until you feel warmth subtly reinforced by sunlight. Anecdotal reports describe the use of window coverings not only for insulation, but also to maintain privacy and block wind-driven snow. Records indicate that settlers layered blankets, cloth, or animal hides over windows as needed, adjusting based on wind direction and severity. Frontier experience shows that these coverings served multiple functions, simultaneously improving thermal efficiency and comfort. Diaries recount families developing intuitive routines for managing these coverings each night. You probably won't realize the ingenuity until you experience the combined effect of layered protection, Some accounts suggest that settlers observed condensation or frost on the interior surfaces as cues for ventilation adjustments. Observations from the period reveal that excess moisture could compromise insulation or bedding, so minor interventions like tilting a window or briefly opening a door were common. Diaries recount that such vigilance prevented dampness-related discomfort and supported health alongside warmth. You probably won't appreciate the significance until you feel the cabin's air balance perfectly with the fire and insulation. Evidence points to the psychological benefit of window management. Some accounts suggest that controlling the visual connection to the outside world, whether seeing snowfall or blocking a dark storm, helped maintain calm and reduce stress during long nights. Diaries recount that settlers integrated these sensory strategies seamlessly with fire bedding and clothing to enhance endurance. Frontier experience shows that both perception and physical warmth were closely linked. You probably won't notice until you sense the calming effect of carefully managed windows. Anecdotal reports describe families arranging small personal items on windowsills to serve as additional windbreaks or minor insulation. Observations from the period reveal that this practice, while seemingly trivial, contributed measurably to heat retention in specific areas. Diaries recount that every little adjustment from draped cloths to strategic placement of objects reinforced the overall warmth strategy. You probably won't appreciate how layered and interconnected these small measures were until you sense the cumulative effect across the cabin. Finally, you lean back against your quilt, feeling the interplay of fire blankets and carefully managed windows surrounding you in comfort. Records indicate that settlers' attentiveness to visual and environmental cues was integral to surviving harsh winter nights. Frontier experience shows that the combination of observation, minor adjustments, and strategic use of natural light and insulation created a living, responsive cabin environment. You probably won't survive as comfortably without such attentiveness. Yet here, immersed in warmth, you feel both the interior and exterior working in quiet harmony to sustain life and comfort. You shift slightly, noticing how the cabin's shadows stretch and sway with the firelight, and you realize that light itself became an essential part of warmth perception. Observations from the period reveal that settlers understood the psychological effect of illumination using candles and hearth glow to reinforce the feeling of heat even when temperatures dipped. Diaries recount that dim light helped maintain calm, reducing anxiety, and promoting a sense of security throughout long nights. You probably won't notice the subtle effect until you feel how warmth seems amplified by the gentle, consistent flicker surrounding you. Some accounts suggest that settlers positioned light sources strategically to reduce drafts, while extending fire-generated warmth. Records indicate that metal plates or reflective surfaces were often placed near candles or lanterns to diffuse heat into shadowed areas, enhancing comfort. Frontier experience shows that these practices combined both practical and psychological benefits, reinforcing warmth perception without additional fuel consumption. You probably won't appreciate the subtlety until you sense how light and warmth work together to create cozy pockets in the cabin. Anecdotal reports describe families alternating candles or lanterns to maintain steady illumination while minimizing fire risk. Diaries recount that this practice allowed continued activity reading or quiet work without disturbing others or reducing warmth. Observations from the period reveal that careful attention to light management improved sleep quality and overall comfort, creating a controlled, habitable environment. You probably won't realize the significance until you notice how each flickering flame contributes to the cabin's rhythm. Some accounts suggest that settlers coordinated light usage with bedtime routines. Records indicate that adjusting illumination signaled children to prepare for sleep, helping synchronize family rest and conserve energy. Frontier experience shows that this visual cue, combined with fire and bedding arrangement, became an integral part of survival strategy. Diaries recount that maintaining consistent light patterns fostered predictability and calm essential for enduring prolonged cold. You probably won't notice the subtle integration until you feel the alignment of cues supporting both mind and body. Evidence points to the use of coloured or tinted glass in lanterns to soften light and reduce glare. Some accounts suggest that settlers experimented with materials to achieve the most comforting ambient effect, subtly influencing mood and perceived warmth. Observations from the period reveal that visual comfort was closely tied to physical comfort, particularly in small enclosed spaces during harsh winters. Diaries recount that these minor adjustments contributed to a sense of sanctuary within the cabin. You probably won't fully appreciate the impact until you feel the cozy interplay of light and warmth. Anecdotal reports describe using light to monitor night activity without disturbing sleepers. Records indicate that low-intensity illumination allowed adults to adjust fire bedding or clothing while children remained undisturbed. Frontier experience shows that managing light carefully preserved energy and heat, while facilitating necessary nighttime tasks. Diaries recount that subtle shadows and gentle glow guided motion and attention, reducing exposure to cold. You probably won't notice the precision until you observe the cabin functioning as a coordinated system of warmth, light, and movement. Some accounts suggest that reflection and surface placement enhance the efficiency of small flames. Observations from the period reveal that polished tin metal trays or even light-coloured fabrics were positioned to amplify glow and radiated warmth. Diaries recount that families tested angles and locations, seasonally integrating these adjustments with fire bedding and clothing. Frontier experience shows that such ingenuity, though simple, produced a noticeable difference in comfort. You probably won't appreciate the layered effect until the heat feels evenly distributed throughout the cabin. Evidence points to the calming effect of synchronized flickering. Diaries recount that when multiple light sources were used in tandem, the combined effect created a gentle rhythm that promoted relaxation and sleep readiness. Observations from the period reveal that settlers intuitively understood this blending sensory input with physical warmth. Frontier experience shows that visual patterns can enhance the perception of safety and comfort, an often overlooked aspect of enduring winter nights. You probably won't notice this until the cabin seems to breathe with a quiet, comforting cadence. Anecdotal reports describe subtle rituals surrounding lighting adjustments. Some accounts suggest that repositioning lamps or trimming wicks became a nightly routine, reinforcing control over the environment. Records indicate that these actions provided a sense of mastery and predictability, reducing anxiety during long, harsh nights. Observations from the period reveal that light management complemented fire bedding and clothing strategies, integrating seamlessly into overall warmth preservation. You probably won't realize the full effect until you sense the cabin's coordinated response to your careful attention. Finally, you settle fully into your bedding, letting the soft glow of fire and lanterns envelop you. Diaries recount that illumination, carefully managed and harmonized with other survival strategies, contributed to both comfort and psychological ease. Frontier experience shows that combining light, fire, and layered materials created a resilient microclimate, capable of sustaining life and rest during extreme cold. You probably won't survive as comfortably without this integration, yet here, surrounded by gentle light and warmth, the cabin feels like a living sanctuary, fully responsive to your presence and needs. You feel the gentle weight of layers around you, realizing that every item in the cabin contributes quietly to survival. Observations from the period reveal that settlers often organized personal belongings to minimize exposure to cold. Diaries recount that clothing, bedding, and tools were kept within easy reach, allowing small adjustments without leaving the warmth of prepared zones. You probably won't notice how crucial this organization is until you sense the ease with which tasks and movements conserve energy and retain heat, Some accounts suggest that even small containers such as wooden boxes or cloth sacks were used to insulate items like food or medicinal herbs, keeping them safe from freezing. Records indicate that strategic placement prevented unnecessary trips outside and reduced exposure to harsh winds. Frontier experience shows that attention to these seemingly minor details significantly improved comfort and efficiency. You probably won't appreciate the cumulative benefit until you see how the cabin functions as a carefully managed microclimate. Anecdotal reports describe settlers arranging bedding, furs, and clothing in a layered sequence according to priority and body warmth needs. Diaries recount that children or the elderly were often positioned nearest to heat sources, while adults adjusted layers to maintain even distribution. Observations from the period reveal that these arrangements were refined through trial observation and experience over many winters. You probably won't notice the subtle impact until you feel the cabin's warmth flow evenly across every sleeping area. Evidence points to the use of elevated platforms or raised sleeping areas to protect against cold floors. Some accounts suggest that simple wooden frames, crates, or straw mats were used to lift bedding, reducing direct contact with freezing boards. Frontier experience shows that this technique preserved heat efficiently and prevented discomfort or frostbite. Diaries recount families experimenting with different heights and materials to achieve optimal insulation. You probably won't realize the subtle advantage until you feel the difference between sleeping directly on cold floors and elevated layers. Records indicate that airflow was managed carefully to prevent both cold drafts and smoke accumulation. Observations from the period reveal that small openings for ventilation were strategically placed, and blankets or furs were arranged to minimize heat loss. Some accounts suggest that settlers monitored subtle shifts in temperature or wind-making adjustments as necessary to maintain comfort. Diaries recount that this balance of insulation and ventilation was critical for both warmth and health. You probably won't notice the precision until you sense how the cabin remains stable despite external conditions. Anecdotal reports describe the integration of personal rituals into this organization. Some accounts suggest that checking bedding, smoothing quilts, or adjusting clothing became habitual, ensuring optimal warmth before sleep. Frontier experience shows that these minor acts contributed significantly to comfort, particularly during extended storms or deep freezes. Diaries recount that children learned these habits intuitively, preserving knowledge of survival strategies. You probably won't appreciate the subtle efficiency until you feel how layered attention sustains both warmth and readiness. Some accounts suggest that settlers used small furs or cloths to line corners' edges and other vulnerable areas where drafts were strongest. Records indicate that these placements enhanced insulation without obstructing movement or visibility. Observations from the period reveal that attention to detail in cabin organization extended beyond sleep-influencing cooking areas, workspaces, and storage. You probably won't notice the subtle effect until the heat feels distributed consistently, even in previously cold corners. Evidence points to the importance of coordinated sleeping arrangements and space management. Diaries recount that families assigned specific areas for each member, considering age, body size, and susceptibility to cold. Frontier experience shows that these arrangements allowed optimal heat sharing and minimized the risk of exposure. Some accounts suggest that sleeping rotations or minor adjustments were performed nightly, reflecting an intuitive understanding of microclimates. You probably won't realize the cumulative impact until warmth feels evenly maintained throughout the cabin. Observations from the period reveal that even small items like cushions, mats, or spare clothing were incorporated into heat retention strategies. Anecdotal reports describe placing these items under or around sleeping areas to block drafts and increase comfort. Records indicate that settlers adapted to the resources available, creating innovative solutions using everyday objects. Diaries recount that this improvisation was a hallmark of frontier ingenuity, demonstrating practical problem-solving in response to environmental challenges. You probably won't appreciate the integration until you sense the cabin as a living system responding to each adjustment. Finally, you settle fully into the carefully arranged bedding and surroundings, letting the coordination of clothing, furs, quilts, and organized items envelop you. Observations from the period reveal that meticulous arrangement of personal and communal space was a vital component of enduring harsh nights. Frontier experience shows that even small adjustments had amplified effects, preserving warmth, comfort, and readiness. Diaries recount the satisfaction and security derived from these routines. You probably won't survive as efficiently without such attention, yet here, surrounded by deliberate organization and layered warmth, the cabin becomes a sanctuary sustaining both body and mind through the long winter night. You notice how the cabin has settled into a quiet rhythm, the subtle warmth of the hearth, blending with the gentle movement of blankets and the soft breathing of companions. Diaries recount that settlers often relied on the cabin's ambient consistency to maintain comfort through the night. Observations from the period reveal that families developed an almost instinctive understanding of how the environment, fire, and body heat interacted. You probably won't realize the significance until you feel the cabin itself seem alive, responding to your presence and subtle shifts in position. Some accounts suggest that small sounds like the creak of floorboards or the rustle of furs were used to gauge room temperature and airflow. Records indicate that settlers quietly monitored these cues, making minor adjustments to blankets or repositioning sleeping companions as necessary. Frontier experience shows that this subtle attentiveness preserved heat and reduced exposure to cold drafts. You probably won't appreciate the effect until you notice how the cabin's ambient warmth adapts to minor changes. Anecdotal reports describe the way settlers coordinated minor movements with fire management. Diaries recount that adjusting embers or adding small twigs during the night was often timed to coincide with shifts in sleeping positions, ensuring steady warmth without disturbing others. Observations from the period reveal that these actions created a continuous responsive system of comfort, blending human behavior with environmental factors. You probably won't notice the careful orchestration until you feel the cabin maintaining equilibrium around you. Evidence points to the role of shared heat in group sleeping arrangements. Some accounts suggest that positioning family members or companions strategically enhanced collective warmth, particularly for children or the elderly. Records indicate that these arrangements reduced energy expenditure while maximizing thermal efficiency. Frontier experience shows that this simple yet deliberate strategy was key to survival in extreme cold. You probably won't appreciate the subtle distribution of warmth until you sense how heat flows evenly through a shared sleeping area. Observations from the period reveal that tactile feedback was an important guide. Diaries recount that settlers adjusted blankets, furs, and body positions in response to the feel of warmth or cold, creating an intuitive feedback loop that sustained comfort. Some accounts suggest that minor shifts such as tucking limbs or repositioning quilts could have measurable effects on heat retention. Frontier experience shows that these small adjustments, though often unconscious, played a vital role in enduring long nights. You probably won't notice the cumulative impact until you feel the steady enveloping warmth. Some accounts suggest that mental focus reinforced physical strategies. Diaries recount that settlers used quiet observation counting or storytelling to remain alert and engaged while maintaining thermal equilibrium. Records indicate that cognitive engagement helped prevent restlessness and encourage subtle adjustments that preserved heat. Observations from the period reveal that combining mind and body in this way enhanced overall survival. You probably won't realize the connection until you sense calm awareness paired with physical comfort Anecdotal reports describe how minor environmental modification supported collective warmth. Some accounts suggest that moving furniture, layering furs, or adjusting window coverings during the night was performed without disrupting sleepers. Diaries recount that this careful attention maintained insulation while accommodating ongoing household needs. Frontier experience shows that the cabin was treated as a living system with warmth managed through subtle human interaction. You probably won't notice the orchestration until you feel the cabin adapting seamlessly around you. Evidence points to the integration of sensory cues in managing comfort. Diaries recount that settlers interpreted temperature drafts and even faint smells to adjust bedding and clothing appropriately. Observations from the period reveal that this holistic awareness allowed families to maintain equilibrium in the harshest conditions. Some accounts suggest that attention to these small indicators prevented cold-related discomfort and illness. You probably won't appreciate the subtlety until you sense the cabin's responsive environment in action. Records indicate that settlers used minimal, precise movements to avoid unnecessary heat loss. Diaries recount that even small fidgeting or shifting could disrupt airflow or reduce insulation efficiency. Frontier experience shows that a conscious, restrained approach preserved warmth and contributed to restful sleep. Some accounts suggest that these habits were passed down through generations, forming an intuitive understanding of how body bedding and environment interact. You probably won't notice the sophistication until you experience the smooth balance of warmth maintained throughout the night. Finally, you settle fully into the layered bedding, feeling the culmination of fire management, shared heat, and careful adjustments around you. Observations from the period reveal that long, harsh winter nights were endured through a combination of attentiveness, coordination, and subtle strategies that reinforced comfort and survival. Diaries recount a quiet satisfaction in knowing every precaution had been taken. You probably won't survive as efficiently without such integration, yet here, surrounded by warmth, presence, and quiet human ingenuity, the cabin becomes a sanctuary that supports body and mind through the relentless cold outside. You stretch lightly, noticing the gentle pressure of layered blankets and furs against your body, and feel the culmination of countless small actions working together to preserve warmth. Observations from the period reveal that settlers approached the end of the night with careful routines, checking fire bedding and clothing, before finally allowing themselves to rest fully. Diaries recount that families reviewed sleeping arrangements, ensured embers were stable, and confirmed that clothing and blankets were positioned to minimize heat loss. You probably won't realize how crucial these final adjustments were until you feel the cabin settle into a quiet, responsive balance, cocooning you in comfort. Some accounts suggest that subtle rituals mark the transition to deep sleep. Records indicate that gently smoothing blankets, tucking edges, and adjusting furs became habitual, almost meditative actions. Frontier experience shows that these motions repeated nightly reinforced thermal efficiency while signaling to the mind and body that it was safe to relax. Diaries recount that children learned these small routines alongside practical survival strategies, internalizing habits that promoted endurance. You probably won't notice the cumulative impact until warmth flows evenly through every part of your body. Anecdotal reports describe the importance of minimizing movement after settling into the sleeping area. Observations from the period reveal that even small shifts could allow drafts to penetrate or redistribute insulation inefficiently. Records indicate that settlers quickly adapted, developing subtle awareness of posture and micro-movements that preserved heat. Frontier experience shows that these small, almost unconscious adjustments had outsized effects on comfort and survival. You probably won't appreciate the precision until you feel the balance maintained with minimal effort. Evidence points to the interplay between ambient warmth, shared heat, and bedding arrangement. diaries recount that positioning family members or companions strategically ensured that warmth circulated efficiently, reinforcing thermal microclimates. Some accounts suggest that pets were included in these arrangements, their body heat supplementing human warmth. Observations from the period reveal that these strategies created a living dynamic environment, responding intuitively to movement and temperature changes. You probably won't notice the subtle orchestration until the cabin seems to breathe warmth around you. Some accounts suggest that small environmental cues like the flicker of embers or the faint creak of logs were monitored quietly even as sleep approached. Diaries recount that attentive listening allowed for minor adjustments, preventing heat loss or sudden discomfort. Frontier experience shows that this awareness became almost second nature, blending sensory input with habitual routines. You probably won't realize the depth of this practice until you sense the cabin responding to both action and presence in harmony. Anecdotal reports describe the final alignment of clothing and furs before closing eyes. Observations from the period reveal that attention to extremities, layering and coverage ensured that warmth was preserved from core to fingertips and toes. Records indicate that these last adjustments were vital, particularly during prolonged cold or when fire embers had burned low. Diaries recount a quiet satisfaction in completing these tasks, knowing that survival and comfort were maximized. You probably won't appreciate the subtle influence until you feel heat fully enveloping your body. Evidence points to the integration of mental calm with physical comfort. Some accounts suggest that settlers use quiet reflection, slow breathing, or whispered stories to reinforce the mind's sense of safety and warmth. Observations from the period reveal that these psychological strategies were as important as physical preparations, reducing stress and improving rest. Frontier experience shows that mental readiness complemented all other survival tactics. You probably won't notice the effect until the mind and body settle into an almost effortless state of endurance. Records indicate that long continuous sleep was facilitated by the combined measures of fire insulation, bedding clothing, and subtle movement management. Diaries recount that families who mastered this system endured the harshest nights with minimal waking or discomfort. Some accounts suggest that this balance was developed through trial observation and intergenerational knowledge transfer. Observations from the period reveal the cumulative power of integrated strategies, each small action amplifying the others. You probably won't survive as effectively without such an orchestrated approach. Anecdotal reports describe the final sensation of warmth spreading steadily through the cabin. Some accounts suggest that settlers recognized the subtle interplay between body heat, shared warmth, and environmental preparation as a key to comfort. Diaries recount the quiet confidence derived from knowing that every precaution was in place, every microclimate optimized. Frontier experience shows that this cumulative effect, though largely imperceptible, defined the difference between enduring discomfort and resting safely. You probably won't appreciate the intricacy until warmth fully envelopes you, steady and constant. Finally, you close your eyes, feeling the cabin, fire, bedding, companions, and subtle routines working together in perfect harmony. Observations from the period reveal that survival on the coldest nights depended on this intricate blend of preparation, observation, and coordination. Diaries recount the quiet satisfaction of families who mastered these strategies, enduring harsh winters with resilience and comfort. Frontier experience shows that attention to detail, both small and large, created an environment capable of sustaining life warmth and rest. You probably won't survive as efficiently without these integrated practices, yet here enveloped in warmth, you feel the cabin as a living protective presence, carrying you gently through the night. You feel the night deepen the cabin, settling into perfect stillness around you. Every layer of blanket, fur, and quilt presses gently against your body, holding warmth, close like a quiet embrace. The fire hums softly, embers radiating gentle heat, while pets and companions rest in steady, unassuming proximity. You notice the subtle rhythm of breathing and the slight creaks of timber, as if the cabin itself breathes with you, creating a sanctuary that responds to every movement and shift. Outside, the wind may howl and snow may fall, but inside, warmth and calm form an invisible shield. You probably won't realize how small actions stacking. Wood layering quilts, arranging clothing, monitoring windows and tending embers combine into a seamless system that supports both comfort and survival until you feel it in your own body. Sensory details mingle the soft scent of pine and herbs, the quiet crackle of fire, the gentle weight of blankets, the subtle heat of companions and pets, all creating a cocoon of enduring warmth. Your mind begins to slow, tracing stories, reflections, and small rituals merging into the comforting cadence of the cabin's night. You feel yourself letting go of tension, surrendering to the layered safety, to the knowledge that every precaution has been taken. Thoughts drift lazily as you float in the gentle, enveloping heat, the world outside muted and distant. Your body, mind, and surroundings harmonize a delicate symphony of survival and comfort. Gradually your awareness softens and you sink fully into rest. You probably won't notice the full artistry of human ingenuity that preserves warmth and life. Yet here within this quiet sanctuary, everything works in unison to cradle you gently through the night, peaceful and safe. Sweet dreams.